Hello các bạn, cái áo này nó hơi cục xí. Nãy mình sơn nữa, mình bị gớt, gớt sơn giờ mình phải may áo đầm xuống để cho mùa hè nó dài xuống. Okay. So, thay ra cái áo mà áo đó. Alright. Cái áo này nãy mình đang bận á, giờ mình sẽ cho nó dài xuống. Miếng khúc dài không bữa kia mình còn, giờ tôi sẽ may vô. Alright. Mấy khúc này phải lên line. Alright, không cần lên line như mấy. Lên line cũng ok. Để cho cái khúc này đi. Alright. Cái này, khúc này, cái khúc này. Alright. Giờ là vậy đó. Alright. So, alright. Yeah. Alright. Now, túm hai bên hông. Okay. Túm bên đây trước. Righty. Ooh. Right. Like that. Alright. Cái này á, thì Okay. Từ đây qua bên đây. Right. Đường dây dưới thì đất mà. Alright. Giờ thành cái áo độc. Right. Wow. Lộn rồi hả? Damn it. Hai một bên rồi. Không sao. Giờ mình lên like cái nữa. Mình che nữa. Vậy thì mình phải để ý cái dây chỉ ở dưới nó bị đứt. Ok. Alright. Nhưng mà cái gì nữa ở dưới đây? May viền cái màu trắng đi ha. Rồi viền ở dưới hai cái gì? Viền cái này nè. Đẹp không? Yeah. Giờ mình viền ha. Giờ tôi viền cái này nha. Alright. Đó, viền vậy nè. Rồi với cái áp đong này nha. Yeah. Đấy. Đâu rồi? Wow. Ồ. Cái hộp quẹt. Thế
Đó là với cái loại, mình phải quá trình
ừm,
bằng mình sẽ làm có biết chữ là đi Cắt lên mấy cái list bài tung thầy Hòa với thầy ở bên nước ngoài đăng lên. Đúng rồi đó, ngoài thầy thích nước Hòa, với nước ngoài giờ nổi tiếng.
Alright, vừa ủng hộ cũng Thái, vừa may đồ. Rồi, giờ mình买này tiếp. Rồi, rồi, sao đây? Hai lộn rồi hả? May lộn rồi. Thiệt là, thôi kệ đi, cái chuyện này vô. Xuống 2 lần. Sao? Cứ tiếp tục. Wow. Diện này đi. Yeah.
Ba chục năm mà cái xịn đó, cái đặc này, đéo là sao, cái vàng đó, cái kép nha, cái kéo như là hòn nha, cái vàng, kéo là làm cái tiền, lai cái kéo này, thấy chưa? Cái mũi nó đẹp lắm, kéo. Cái hồi đó bà sư phụ á, phụ nhà dùm, mỗi đứa một trò mà ra ngày là để bà mua đặt dùm cái kép. kéo và cái kéo là đẹp lắm mà mày hay làm cái mũi nhọn, chứ cái mũi đẹp, mũi kẹo đẹp, cái kéo.
Thơm, thôi còn hết trơn rồi dụ mỗi chai khác vô. Ha,
À, ở giúp kia á, dạ, mình kia á. Qua bên kia mà làm gì không? Nằm ngay chỗ này thôi, chỗ này nằm được thôi à, với chung thôi à. Có giải thôi nằm. Giờ đang tới được rồi, xong cái áo này là đi xe.
quá, mai biết sai rồi. Giờ tháo này ra cho rồi. Ồ, ồ được ha. Ồ, ồ, yeah. Có thể cắt lên cái khúc này. Riêng mất thời giờ quá. Giờ chỉ cắt lên thôi. Ok.
Rồi, nguyện vấn ai được em mới sức khỏe an lành em. Cảm ơn em đã vào Liên, ủng hộ chị.
bật đẩy nha, giờ phải tháo ra, ngồi xuống đi.
Thì mà chút trong năm bạc đầu sẽ là nào có ai là trong năm 60 năm 50 năm là đầu tóc bạc, 60 năm là tóc đã bạc, 50 năm 40 năm 30 năm là tóc vàng, bây giờ bạc sớm. Trong năm là tiền nhỏ hả? 125 nè, 125 là nhiều. Mấy mươi năm cuộc đời nghe là các bạn 6 năm cuộc đời anh đã thấy có 6 năm cuộc đời. Không là đây rồi. Tự do là sống tự do không, không có ai, không ai ràng buộc, là sung sướng nhất. Sống tự do không ai ràng buộc, nhiều người trân trọng và hạnh phúc nhất ở trên đời trên đời này. Do là không ai ràng buộc, khỏi thơ khỏi tình, khỏi động khỏi dạ khỏi dơ, khỏi ăn ngủ không ngủ, không mà bông quay lên hết. Hai tài trước là bông quay lên, phần sau cũng bông quay lên, gãy cách bông đây, tay áo bông quay lên, bông rồi đó, đúng rồi, cái chị bông, đúng thôi chị bông rồi đó. ai bông quên lên, ai đặt chân cũng bông quên lên, đá phải canh bông hết, bông quên lên, ra thứ ba cũng bông quên lên. Làm gửi cái hình gì vậy ta? Thịt rồi phải không? Thịt con gì đó? Gì đó? Này yêu đâu hết rồi, chạy chạy rồi. Mấy người xem đi. Còn có một mình là sẽ ra à, ổng con gì đó, con thỏ ha, con chuột, thỏ nó đưa tóm cho đưa ra đi đưa ra đưa. Rồi, sắp xong rồi mình đi ăn sáng, để ra rồi sơ soạn mình chút xíu trưa trưa chiều chiều mình lên like mình cắt cái áo cắt áo vào ba mình cắt tiếp. Vậy sẽ ra có vô kênh của An Nguyễn không? Vô kênh mấy kênh mà hát á, kênh quanh quanh Nguyễn là An Nguyễn, kênh Thầy chắc phải hát Zalo để cho vui đó. biết đàn rồi giỏi quá, mình thích học đánh đàn ấy, mình thích học, nói học đánh đàn á. Sáng sớm mà dậy mình nghe đánh đàn, nghe cái riềng, nghe hát sao đâu, nhập tâm vô lòng người, hay nhẹ nhàng, phớt phớt người mẹ, nhàn vào tấu á, chàng ơi nghe mà ngây ngất. Thì dạy biết cách đàn, học đàn, học 2 tháng là biết gì ha, sư Lan ha. Mình thích học đánh đàn á, mà phải có thời gian mình đi học vậy tháng. Người nào mà sáng dạ học 2 tháng à, 2 tháng là biết đánh đàn. Phim phi bóng là cách nó xề tới xề luôn phi bóng hoặc tao đi phim thôi đụng mưa nó chạy qua đi. Sự kiện rồi lọt phim là nó hoặc là cái sự xong mà kiểm tra là Lần hồi lề, hồi lề, vậy á, khi nào ấy mà nói là lên mấy cây kia hát hiên ngang đó, đừng sĩ làm thích hát chứ không có hát xả chát, cho đầu óc mình phật là đẹp, mình suy nghĩ gì trơn á, có công việc mình sẽ làm, rồi á là mình, giao lưu văn nghệ, mình hát, mình hò, mình niệm Phật, mình nguyện, chứ đâu có người nó chẻ ra cái bài gì mà yêu đương tất cả thì hay, bài có vậy. Có lẽ tôi nghèo nên người ta mới phục tình, có lẽ tôi nghèo nên thì cứ làm có lại sẽ làm nghe mình hát cái bài đó chứ. Con lẽ thôi nghèo nghèo rồi người ta mới phụ tình. Nghe chèm hát chào mưa, nghe ướt át chèm chào mưa. Tại Thế Nam vừa đàn vừa hát hay quá. Phải mình ở gần mình được học đàn hay vui. Đó. Còn riêng nước giải qua lớp, giải nó không làm được cái gì đâu, được cái nó không được cái gì. Like lại xin em nghe, mình xuống like nghe, mình ăn sáng. Ăn sáng rồi xin làm ơi. Hẹn gặp lại cái like mới. Sáng nó khò muối thì tốt, uống nước ấm ấm. Bye. Bye bye lại xin em, hẹn gặp lại like mới nha. Bye.
The female psychology PhD who time traveled to the royal harem. Chapter 35. The female psychology PhD who time traveled to the royal harem. Chapter 35. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Chapter 35. But if one was a bit foolish, they would not deceive their birth mother and elder sister by claiming to send Jiang Xinyue to the palace to pave the way for Jiang Yutong. He said it backwards. Allowing Jiang Yutong and Jiang Xinyue to enter the palace together was to enable Jiang Xinyue to use her simple-minded birth sister to pave the way for herself, maximizing the value of her beauty. The deputy minister of the Hongchan temple calculated everything, but he never expected that his own devastatingly beautiful illegitimate daughter would be so useless. After the Xuanwu emperor favored her for 2 days and spoke some sweet words, she forgot her own surname and recklessly provoked concubinely. Who was concubinely? She was the granddaughter of the current chief minister, the supreme concubine who had reigned over the harem for 10 years and held the emperor's deepest affections. All once, once again, it was because of concubinely. Rumble. The thunder roared. Fortunately, Shike had chirped to Jiang Xinyue about many things that happened in the Jiang household, so she finally fell into a dazed sleep in the late night. There's a fire. There's a fire. Not long after she fell asleep, noisy footsteps could be heard outside. Jiang Xinyue sat up, and Shike rubbed her eyes. Mistress, you rest. This servant will go check. Before Shike could leave, Xia Xuanzi knocked on the door from outside. After a while, he said, Precious consort, did I disturb your and Shike's sleep? Shike put on an outer robe and opened the door. What happened? The Shihua palace caught fire. A side palace was struck by lightning, and the eaves fell inside, igniting a blaze. 2 palace maids were burned to death. Jiang Xinyue heard this and frowned, thinking, the Shihua palace again. It seemed those 2 palace maids were the ones who secretly swapped Consort Zhang's laxative with arsenic. How could there be such a coincidence? It was simply a case of human malice taking advantage of a natural disaster to silence them. Never mind. She lay back down, closed the door. It has nothing to do with us. The Shihua Palace was in the direction of the Palace of Exile, but still some distance away. The Xuanwu Emperor glanced towards the cold, dark direction of the Palace of Exile, without even a glimmer of light. The next day, Jiang Xinyue stretched lazily as she woke up from her slumber. Outside, Shike's energetic voice rang out. Here, here, and here. Clean it all up. Didn't you eat? There's still dust here. My mistress sunbathes here every day, so the branches must be trimmed so they don't block the sunlight. You dare glare at me? Still think you're consort Jiang? You're just a sinner in the Palace of Exile now. Anyone can order you around, understand? Don't act so high and mighty, or you won't get any food. She had quite the arrogant servant's attitude. Jiang Xinyue draped an outer robe over her shoulders. She didn't need Shike's assistance, as a basin of hot water would already be prepared for her expected waking time. After washing her face, she stepped outside. She Quebec. Mistress, you're awake. Xia Xuanzi went to get our breakfast. Her quick change of demeanor was astonishing. Jiang Xinyue, Jiang Yuan, whose poor health often caused her to cough up blood, had been tormented all morning. Seeing Jiang Xinyue, she threw the broom in front of her. I may be the daughter of the Ministry of Officials, but you let your maid humiliate me like this. Don't you? Slap her mouth. Slap. Jiang Yuan was struck dumb by the slap from none other than Jiang Xinyue's lowly maid. Jiang Xinyue, you. Hit her again. Jiang Xinyue yawned and twisted her neck, saying nonchalantly, Keep hitting her until this sinner in the Palace of Exile learns how to bow and address me properly. Slap, slap, slap. Shike had disliked Jiang Yuan for a long time. Now that she had her mistress's orders, she rolled up her sleeves and struck left and right, for insulting my mistress, for trying to poison my mistress, for conspiring with concubinely. for scheming against my mistress. While Jiang Yuan was being beaten, Xiao Xuanzi returned with the breakfast. For Jiang Yuan, it was still too cold, hard plain buns. Jiang Xinyue only drank half a bowl of porridge before her throat started hurting, so she shook her head and refused to eat more. She never wasted food, as the leftovers would go into Xiao Xuanzi and Shikei's stomachs. The golden abalone and sea cucumber porridge emitted a tantalizing aroma. Shikei's hand paused for a moment, giving Jiang Yuan a chance to catch her breath. Using her hand to shield her face, she weakly said, Don't hit me anymore. I'm the sinner, greets the precious consort. If Shikei kept hitting, Jiang Yuan might have been killed by her fists instead of the arsenic poison. Her mouth felt like some teeth had loosened, her lips were stinging painfully, and her throat burned incessantly. She spat out a mouthful of fresh, blackish red blood. It was truly a wretched scene. When consorts Jean and Juan arrived, they were startled by the brutal sight and couldn't move. You. After recovering, Consort Juan pulled Consort Jean and rushed forward. Precious consort, you're so domineering, even after being exiled to the Palace of Exile. Aren't you afraid the Emperor will punish you for such violence? Originally sitting under a tree and eating while enjoying Jiang Yuan's misery, Jiang Xinyue now weakly reclined on a noble chair when the two came. Please forgive me, sisters. This concubine is still quite frail and cannot bow to you both. I'm sure kind-hearted sisters will not blame me. She reminded them that Jiang Yuan was the culprit who tried to poison her, nearly costing her life. She was merely disciplining Jiang Yuan, yet consorts Jean and Juan rushed to defend her. Well, since they were so kind-hearted as to let the one who tried to kill her off lightly, they surely wouldn't blame a sick person like her for not greeting them properly. Dies Coover dated novels on NOV/E/Wind Co. Otherwise, it would be too hypocritical. Consort One was briefly stunned, her face flushing. The Emperor has already demoted her to a palace maid. She has received her due punishment. If you are dissatisfied, you can appeal to the Emperor. Hinting that Jiang Xinyue was defying the Emperor's decree, laying a trap for her. Indeed, Jiang Xinyue said randomly, she is already a sinner in the Palace of Exile. Just as Consort One was puzzled by her meaning, Consort Jean suddenly looked at Consort One coldly. For a mere concubine, a lowly prisoner has dared to point her nose at me and shout insults. Did I not punish her? This trivial matter also requires troubling His Majesty, but who knows whether he will punish my crime or the crime of you two sisters. It is only natural for a master to punish her servants. Has Consort One never disciplined her errant maids before? Sharp tongue, Consort Jean glared at nearly fainting Jiang Yuan. Did you not greet me and Consort One upon seeing us? Should I not slap you as well? Jiang Xinyue stood up. Since Consort Jean has deliberately come to the Palace of Exile to make trouble for this concubine, I have no choice but to pay my respects. Before she could kneel down, she swayed and collapsed onto Shikei. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Report chapter comments. Novel bin read light novel, web novel, Korean novel, and Chinese novel online for free. You can find hundreds of English translated light novel, web novel, Korean novel, and Chinese novel which are daily updated. Read novels online. Read The Female Psychology PhD Who Time Traveled to the Royal Harem. Chapter 36. The Female Psychology PhD Who Time Traveled to the Royal Harem. Chapter 36. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Chapter 36. Ah! Shikei let out a shrill cry, hugging Jiang Xinyue as she wept, My lady. My lady? Wah wah wah. You were right, my lady. Once you lost power, there are people everywhere who want to take your life. We were doing just fine in the Palace of Exile, not bothering anyone. Why is it that one day we're being poisoned, and the next we're being harassed? Wah. My poor lady. My ill-fated lady. The sound of weeping spilled out from the walls of the palace of exile, and passing palace maids and eunuchs whispered amongst themselves, while some bolder ones even peeked furtively at the gate. Visit N0 VL/BIN for the best novel reading experience. They could not see what was ahead, but from their vantage point, they only saw Consort Juan and Consort Jean looking down disdainfully at the seemingly unconscious Consort Jin, who lay sprawled on the ground. With Jiang Yuan's prior downfall as a cautionary tale before them, Consort Juan flicked her handkerchief. How inauspicious. With Jiang Xinhua lying there on the ground, there was nothing they could do. If the emperor found out, he would accuse them of bullying her again. After they left, the palace of exile fell silent for a long while. Jiang Xinhua was a slippery eel. No matter what schemes and plots you hatched against her, she always had a stroke of luck that allowed her to turn misfortune into good fortune. If you tried to oppress her with status, she would appear frail and sickly, gasping for breath every few steps, coughing incessantly, until everyone in the palace thought you were bullying her before she could even say a word. Recalling the emperor's words when he forced Jiang Yuan to eat the poisoned pastry, none of the other consorts dared to make a move against her. In the blink of an eye, it was the 12th month, and the leaves of the camphor tree in the palace of exile had all fallen, leaving only bare, desolate branches. Jiang Xinhua had not gone to bask under the tree for a long time, as it was too cold. Since she had recovered, royal physicians stopped visiting. The Internal Affairs Department had not completely forgotten about the Palace of Exile, but they were not as diligent either. Cough, cough, cough. Indeed, the charcoal they sent was no longer the high-quality red charcoal, but the inferior pine charcoal used by the palace maids and eunuchs. Not only did it fail to provide enough warmth, it also produced a lot of smoke and ash, stinging the eyes and causing incessant coughing. My lady, don't look down on this charcoal. Among all the consorts in the Palace of Exile, you're the only one who gets this allowance. It's better than nothing. She could try to comfort her, afraid that she would be disheartened. Jiang Xinhua opened the window a crack. When have I ever been the sort to complain? This hardship is really temporary. Our good days are still ahead of us. In half a month, it would be New Year's Eve, of the year when envoys from various nations tribute to the Great Zhou Empire. Jiang Xinyue's opportunistic father was a junior minister at the Ministry of Rights, charged with overseeing ceremonial arrangements, welcoming foreign guests, managing etiquette, and so on. If the emperor still had feelings for her, her from the palace of exile before the new year. Of course, she would not put all her eggs in one basket. Even if the emperor did not care for her, Empress Jew. The court needed her father's services during this critical time, and the Empress Jew would not let such a good opportunity slip by. My lady. A furtive figure approached Shiko's bedchamber. Young eunuch Xiao Xian leading someone in. Consort Jin, you have a visitor. Xiao Xian's guest was likely one of their own people, not an adversary who occupied his function. Mistress and servant exchanged a glance, and Jiang Xinhua motioned for Shike to open it. Shuang Jiang, what are you doing here? Quick, come in. Shuang Jiang, bundled up in a thick winter coat, entered and shoved a food box into Shike's arms before rushing to Jiang Xinhua's bedside in tears. My lady, I finally get to see you. Are you feeling better? Have all the after effects of the poison been purged? Did Consort One bully you that day? Thinking of her beloved lady suffering in the palace of exile, Shuang Jiang could not stop her tears. Yang Xinhua hurried to console her. Don't cry. Don't cry. When you cry, it pains my heart. How are things in the Heshi Palace? Have you all been mistreated? Shuang Jian shook her head. Before my lady entered the palace of exile, you entrusted us the first princess, the second princess, the third prince. The young masters and mistresses often visit the Hishi Palace to pick fresh fruits and vegetables for the imperial kitchen to prepare for the emperor. The emperor has even come to check us, instructing me to tend the gardens well. External Affairs Department officials dare not neglect our palace out of respect for the princesses and prince. So it's Emperor didn't have to release her, or else he would not have spoken Jiang in such a manner. Shuang Jiang, you brought charcoal. She box to find the long-awaited red charcoal inside, and immediately wrote a smile. Don't need to worry about Our Lady anymore. Our Lady is not the sort to suffer in silence. But where did you get this charcoal? Shuang Jiang glanced around the room. The furnishings were no worse than those in her lady's chambers in the house, or wiping away her tears to explain. Consort Liang and Consort Despair's allowances. Afraid that these people would notice if they sent the good charcoal openly. I had to disguise it as food provisions. Although the emperor still had some affection for her lady, it was not much compared to the favor he showed the noble consorts. If it were poor conflicts, it would only bring suffering upon her lady. It was better to have one less trouble. After swapping off the charcoal, the air in the room felt much fresher. Shuang Jiang could not linger, or have super sake time, and risk being mistaken for assassin by imperial guards on her way back, with no one to plead her case. Under Xiao Xian's guidance, she slipped away from the palace of exile once more. From the adjacent room, something heavy drummed, followed by curses, all played to but now that I've fallen on hard times, not a single one of you has sent me bedding or blankets. Have the people from the Internal Affairs Department died? Are you trying to freeze me to death? Jiang Xingyue instructed Shike to gather up the inferior pine charcoal, have Xiao Xian send it over to her. My lady, Shike stomped her foot in protest. You can't. I'm not taking pity on her. She would never pity any consort who had tried to harm her and ended up disgraced. I said before that I want her to witness with her own eyes as I rise step by step to greater heights. If she can't endure this winter, how will she ever see the day I leave the Palace of Exile? Her lady always had her own calculations. As long as she did not let maternal affection cloud her judgment, it would be fine. The imperial harem had no room for such soft-heartedness among the consorts. These charcoals were sent by Consort Jin? Jiang Yuan shivered with cold. There was no silk quilt, let alone an ordinary cotton quilt on the wooden bed. There was only a tattered, thin sheet that was barely a covering, and a blanket that provided no warmth at all, its purple-red floral pattern faded from repeated washings. Xiao Xian set down the charcoal brazier, a polite smile on his face. Consort Jin is kind-hearted. Jiang Yuan let out a cold laugh. Kind-hearted? Any kind-hearted woman in this palace has long since gone to meet King Yama. She merely hides her true nature well. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Report chapter comments. Novel been read light novel, web novel, Korean novel, and Chinese novel online for free. The Female Psychology PhD Who Time Traveled to the Royal Harem. Chapter 37. The Female Psychology PhD Who Time Traveled to the Royal Harem. Chapter 37. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Chapter 37. Xiao Xuanzi didn't speak, his eyes showing no hint of emotion, still smiling at her. Jiang Yuan's smile was so loyal to her, only hoping that one day she'll be restored from the Palace of Exile. Ride on coattails to success. Let me tell you, don't dream about it. She's only pretending to be nice to you because she's temporarily fallen out of favor. Once she regains her power, that will be the day you die. In the palace, there were too many masters and servants who stood by each other through hard times. But on the day the master regained power, the first thing they did was turn on their loyal servants. Only because that person had seen her at her worst and knew her deepest secrets. Xiao Xuanzi-san, goods have been delivered. Do with them as you wish. He was trying to curry favor with Consort Jin. In this palace, masters and servants were all the same. So who wouldn't want to climb up the ranks? He had previously served the favored consorts, but because he was jealous of his capabilities and feared he would threaten his position upwards, praise from the master, he had him transferred to the palace of exile, where he would never rise again. He had lived in the palace of exile for 8 years, originally resigned to his fate. But heaven sent consort Jin his way, practically handing to the lad well. Would he be able to not climb it? But Jiang Yuan was wrong about one thing. People exchanged sincerity. If Consort Jin was only using him with no genuine feelings, she treated her the same. Yet after spending so much time together, sense that Consort Jin possessed a simplicity and genuineness that most consorts lack. She was cunning and scheming, but her calculations were directed at her ethics. With her own people, she was extremely tactful. This could be seen from how she risked being caught by hot coals to the palace of exile during the first frost. While a torch wind swept through the hall, Jiang Yuan never dreamed of a close winter in the palace of exile when she was nearly freezing to death. Warmth came from her enemy. She felt no gratitude at all, even thinking that Jiang Xiyue was just so wrong. They were both exiled consorts, yet she lived in luxury with servants attending to her needs, while Jiang Yuan suffered cold. Now, even to wash her clothes, she had to fetch water herself. Zhongcui Palace. Consort One Delver frowned, her eyes as red as a rabbit's, her tears unshed, looking utterly pitiful. But the Xuanwu emperor on the throne was stony-hearted, unmoved. Consorts are not permitted to meddle in state affairs, yet Consort One made suggestions to me about making the secretary of the Ministry of Rights the vice minister. Do you know that Vice Minister Jiang studied abroad and speaks 5 languages? He is the most talented man in the Great Yan dynasty. The emperor seemed angry. Consort One dared not speak. Wasn't it the emperor who had expressed reluctance to rehire the vice minister of the Ministry of Rights in front of her, showing his difficulty? To help resolve the emperor's dilemma, she had casually suggested the secretary. She was a woman who had never left her family compound before entering the palace, and had been locked in the inner palace. How could she know how talented Vice Minister John was? She knew that the Ministry of Rights oversaw foreign envoys and guests, determining their ranks and hosting them with proper ceremony, assigning them quarters, greeting them upon arrival, bestowing gifts, and hosting banquets for them. It also warned the relevant departments to make preparations in advance. If there were tribute items, it would record the quantities and report them to the foreign quarters, then escort the envoys to
Yay.
present the tribute.
Xong.
How could she have known they needed to speak so many foreign languages? For her interference in state affairs, Consort One of the 4th rank was demoted to the 5th rank concubine One. This caused many of the other consorts who had hoped to make a splash at the New Year's banquet to quiet down. None of them wanted a decade of effort to go to waste in a single day. So when the Ministry of Rights lacked enough translators, leaving the emperor at a loss, Empress Ju suddenly announced the findings of the investigation into concubine Li's drowning incident from some time ago. It was all because the wicked servant Jiang Yuan, jealous of Consort Jin's favor and her own demotion over the Shaoxi incident, harbored malicious intentions toward Consort Jin. First, she sawed through the railings at Shihua Palace, then lured concubine Li there, deliberately greasing the already damaged floorboards, causing the eunuchs carrying concubine Li's sedan to slip and drop her into the water. Afterward, she bribed a eunuch from the Internal Affairs Department using a non-existent palace made to frame Shike, Consort Jin's attendant, then manipulated the uninformed consorts into pressuring the emperor to exile Consort Jin to the Palace of Exile. Her goal was to have Consort Jin ingest arsenic that day and die a miserable death in exile. What an evil mind, Consort Liang chimed in. So Consort Jin suffered that injustice for no reason? Empress Ju smiled slightly and suggested to the emperor, I once heard that Vice Minister Jiang's daughters were all taught foreign languages from a young age by their father. 5 talented linguists. Since there is a need for such talents at the New Year's banquet, why not release Consort Jin to make amends, and have her accompany and translate for your majesty? Would that not better showcase our great nation's tradition of having educated and talented women? In short, the Xuanwu emperor would look good to have such an accomplished consort. Sitting in her seat, concubine Li seethed with hatred. The injury on her forehead had actually healed in just 3 days, but to sell the act, she had bandaged it for over a month. She had worked so hard to put on the show, only for a wrench named Jiang Yuan to be thrown into the works, even preparing bridal garments for Jiang Xinyue. But what could she do? Jiang Yuan had become a sacrificial pawn, and the emperor's expression told her that he was tempted by the empress's proposal. She certainly couldn't go against the emperor's wishes just for the sake of Jiang Yuan. Consort 1 was demoted for suggesting that the Secretary of the Ministry of Rights replace Vice Minister Jiang. Sometimes Concubine Li felt utterly confused.
Right.
Was the Emperor angry at Consort 1 for bullying Consort Jin in the Palace of Exile? Or was it really because she interfered in state affairs? When the first snow of the year fell in the Great Yan Dynasty, Jiang Xinyue had Xiao Xuanzi fetch the imperial chef she had previously taught to make roasted meat, and had him bring the ingredients she needed. She wanted to make fried chicken. The Korean drama trifecta: fried chicken, beer, and a handsome man. The handsome man hadn't come to find her yet, so she'd have to make do with just the food for now. Explore new ovals on Envel by Kong. The two chefs, having gained status in the imperial kitchen by learning Jiang Xinyue's roasted meat recipe, quickly prepared all the ingredients she requested upon hearing that Consort Jin wanted to cook something delicious again. They didn't care whether they went to Hishi Palace or the Palace of Exile. What mattered was learning the skills to impress the emperor and the consorts, so they could gain whatever they desired. Gazing at the array of stoves and pans before her, Jiang Xinyue rolled up her sleeves and got to work. Let's marinate the chicken first. Otherwise, once battered and browned, the meat inside would be flavorless and not as tasty. My lady, you have some flour on your nose. Allow this servant to wipe it off for you. Before Shike could act, the imperial edict arrived, causing everyone to immediately kneel on the ground, disregarding the mess on their hands. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Report chapter comments. Novel been read light novel, web novel, Korean novel, and Chinese novel online for free. You can find hundreds of English translated light novel, web novel, Korean novel, and Chinese novel which are daily. The female psychology PhD who time traveled to the royal harem. Chapter 38. The female psychology PhD who time traveled to the royal harem. Chapter 38. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Chapter 38. By the grace of heaven, the emperor proclaims, Jiang Xinyue, a woman of virtuous conduct, knowledgeable and wise, respectful and filial. We hereby proclaim Jiang Xinyue, who has supported the inner affairs, conducted yourself with propriety, and embodied the spirit of a noble family. We are greatly pleased. We now confer upon you the title of Consort Jin, as a sign of our imperial favor. May you cherish this grace, conduct yourself with propriety and filial piety. This is our command. Gi, Guirong, and Goyuan were all titles for consorts of the fourth rank. Previously, Consort 1 held this position, but now Jiang Xinyue had attained it, while Consort 1 had been demoted by 2 ranks, falling behind her. From Lady Jiang to Consort Jin, then Jin Fangyi, and now leaping several ranks to be named Consort Jin, she had achieved this promotion in merely half a year. This was a pace of advancement that ordinary consorts might never achieve in their entire lives. Even Concubine Li, who had risen from a humble talent to Consort Li, had taken 3 years. Now, everyone was still in disbelief, feeling that this title was something Jiang Xinyue had won with her life, nothing to be envious of. But if they thought about it carefully, they would be alarmed. It seemed that every time Jiang Xinyue was wronged, she would advance 2 ranks. When her life was in peril, she leaped 4 ranks, a truly terrifying prospect. Your humble servant thanks your majesty for your boundless grace. When Jiang Xinyue rose from the ground, tears streamed down her face, a mix of the anguish of clearing her name, the joy of being able to see the emperor again, and the release of the suffering she had endured. Wang Dequan could not help but feel heartache when he saw this, and said, Quick, don't cry anymore, Consort Jin. His Majesty has sent attendants from the Bureau of Palace Affairs to assist you in dressing and freshening up. The entire imperial palace now waits at the gates of the Palace of Exile to welcome you back to the Hishi Palace. This was an immense honor. Never before had any consort been regarded so highly by the emperor, not even the empress or concubine Li. From this day forth, no one would dare look down upon consort Jin, nor would anyone consider her a mere substitute for another. She now had the capital to rival concubine Li's charm. Two imperial chefs were still lamenting that they would not learn the wondrous dish called fried chicken when consort Jin turned and said, "Move all of these things to the Hishi Palace later. I wish to treat His Majesty and Her Majesty the Empress to fried chicken." Oh my, how delightful! Fried chicken, beer, and handsome men. She had it all. Outside the Palace of Exile, the Emperor and Empress stood under the eaves, sheltered from the snow, with hand warmers tucked in their sleeves, surrounded by a throng of palace attendants, not feeling the cold. Concubine Li, Consort Da, and Consort Liang were high-ranking consorts, each attended to by their own servants. Though they could not stand alongside the imperial couple, they had palace maids holding umbrellas for them, protecting them from the snow. Only the lower-ranked consorts who had fallen out of favor suffered, standing in the freezing snow and watching the emperor heap all his affections upon another woman, unable to voice any grievance. The goose-feather snow showed no signs of abating. The empress looked back and said, "Your Majesty, perhaps they should take shelter in the gallery?" The Xuanwu emperor observed the carefully made-up consorts, their appearances ruined by the melting snow soaking their makeup and hair, looking like ghosts. Indeed, not everyone could remain radiant bare-faced like his precious consort Jin, whose unadorned beauty was still breathtaking. Yet these consorts had not truly come to welcome consort Jin's release from the Palace of Exile. Their faces betrayed resentment before they could conceal it, caught by the emperor's gaze. Only consort Jean may remain. The rest shall take shelter in the gallery. Caught red-handed, consort Jean felt deeply embarrassed, her face flushing as she lowered her head, not daring to meet the emperor's eyes again. As everyone retreated to the gallery, consort Jin's dishevelment became even more apparent. UW Uvels Up Tez on NOV/L/B-I.com. Consort Jin has arrived. Clad in an elegant snow-gray silk gown embroidered with seasonal flowers, with a fur-lined overcoat of a deeper shade, a pale pink fur trim framing her porcelain face no larger than a palm. Despite her prolonged stay in the Palace of Exile, her beauty remained untarnished. In fact, her slightly thinner frame lent her a poignant, delicate air. Yet her eyes shone with tenderness, tears welling up before she could speak, her demeanor so alluring that one wished to pluck the moon from the sky and gift it to her. Her face was bare of makeup, for she was only 16, at the peak of youthful radiance, embodying the notion that true beauty needs no artificial enhancement, the foremost among flowers. "Your humble servant greets your Majesty, and greets Her Majesty the Empress." As she began to kneel, a strong hand firmly supported her arm. The Xuanwu Emperor's gaze burned with longing barely restrained as he embraced her, saying, "My beloved has suffered." Clearly, whatever truth lay behind concubine Li's mishap, it must have cleared Jiang Xinyue's name for her to emerge so triumphantly from the Palace of Exile. Jiang Xinyue shook her head, a crystalline tear rolling down, searing the Emperor's heart. "As long as your Majesty remembers your humble servant, I do not suffer." She was telling the Xuanwu Emperor that she understood and trusted all his decisions. The Emperor's heart swelled with affection, cherishing her even more. Xiao Xuanzi stood behind the door, envy flashing in Jiang Yuan's eyes as she said bitterly, "Do you see? She has risen to such heights now, yet has she spared a thought to elevate you? For all your kindness to her, you have been repaid with indifference." Though Xiao Xuanzi knew consort Jin was not that sort of person, the prospect of being left behind to guard this desolate palace of exile while they departed filled him with sadness. Yet just as he resigned himself to merely catching glimpses of consort Jin from afar in the palace, avoiding her, the Xuanwu Emperor's gaze fell upon him. Soon after, the head eunuch Wang Quan approached him, saying, "You must be Xiao Xuanzi." To Jiang Yuan's astonishment, Wang Dequan continued, I have heard that you were attentive to Consort Jin during her time in the Palace of Exile. She is grateful and has requested you from His Majesty and Her Majesty. From now on, you shall serve in the Hishi Palace. What incredible fortune! But this good fortune was earned through his own kindness. Tears welled up in Xiao Xuanzi's eyes as he knelt, kowtowing. This servant thanks His Majesty. Thanks Her Majesty the Empress. Thanks. Consort Jin. With Wang Dequan leading Xiao Xuanzi back to Jiang Xinyue's side, a grand procession escorted the Emperor and Consort Jin back to the Hishi Palace. Of course, Concubine Li and the others had no opportunity to sample the delicacy of fried chicken, but the Hishi Palace was more lively than during the New Year celebrations that day. Rejected at the gates were Concubine Li, Consort Jean, and others, forced to return to their own palaces, their ambitions thwarted. The Empress Dowager, Consort Liang, and Consort Da assumed that Consort Jin, having just returned from the Palace of Exile, must be eager to rekindle her intimacy with the Emperor. But no, not only did she not dismiss the others, but she also summoned Shike and Shuang Jiang to bring over the crown princess, the second princess, and the third prince. Consort Jin is making a delicacy today that you children will surely love. Consider it Consort Jin's way of thanking you for looking after the Hishi Palace. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Report chapter comments. Novel been read light novel, web novel, Korean novel, and Chinese novel. The female psychology PhD who time traveled to the royal harem. Chapter 39. The female psychology PhD who time traveled to the royal harem. Chapter 39. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Chapter 39. The same scene. The Xuanwu Emperor and the Empress were conversing, but the Emperor's expression was not as gentle as when he first ate the roasted meat. Empress, Consort Jin is innocent and pure-hearted. Despite being harmed by the dirty schemes of the palace, she bears no resentment. Isn't that rare? Empress Ju, thinking the Emperor was being sincere, agreed. Yes, it is indeed rare. Therefore, I do not wish for anyone to ruin this rarity. Empress, do you understand? Empress Ju trembled, rooted to the spot, her complexion turning somewhat ashen. The Emperor, he knows everything. Your Majesties, what are you whispering about? Jiang Xinyue waved at them. Come over here. Try the fried chicken I made. The eldest princess and the second princess loved it. There was mulled hawthorn wine warming on a small stove. Just a little sip for the princesses, pleasantly sour and sweet, not spicy at all. The third prince couldn't have any, as he was only 7 years old, too young. The two imperial chefs were immensely grateful to Consort Jin for teaching them new culinary skills, praising the fried chicken profusely. Although such greasy food shouldn't be eaten too much, it was still irresistibly crispy and fragrant. Just smelling the aroma made one's mouth water. While not suitable as a main dish, it made for an excellent snack to stave off hunger. Moreover, Consort Jin said that anything could be fried. When they returned, they would follow her recipe to fry some chicken wings, drumsticks, and what was it? Oh yes, popcorn chicken. They would then send it to the various princesses and consorts to try. If the response was good, it would be another accomplishment. There were no musical instruments this time, but it stirred pleasant memories for the Xuanwu Emperor. He turned to Wang Dequan and instructed, Remind me tomorrow after the morning court session to have the ministers of the Han Huizi and Minister Jiang come to the imperial study to discuss the New Year's banquet. Yes, your servant will remember. Wang Dequan glanced at Consort Jin. This Minister Jiang was indeed her father. That night, after seeing everyone off, Xuanwu Emperor could no longer restrain his emotions and embraced his beloved consort. Jiang Xinyu lay on his chest, listening to his strong, powerful heartbeat, her mind undisturbed. How could she possibly harbor no resentment? She had done nothing wrong, and yet the Emperor, in order to placate Concubine Li, had her sent to the court palace. Was it not because the value she provided was not as high as Concubine Li's, so one had to be abandoned, and she was the one discarded? It was no use saying the emperor had not treated her poorly before, secretly ordering the imperial household department to look after her. She was blameless, yet suffered such injustice for no reason. That was the least the emperor should have done. A man worthy of her love would stand firmly by her side, trust her, protect her, and understand her. The Xuanbu emperor was merely a stepping stone in her path to advancement. He could divide his affections between Empress Ju, concubine Li, consort Liang, and consort De. Too cheap. She did not covet it. She had no desire to compete with other women. Having received a higher education in the 21st century, even studying abroad, her thoughts were relatively open and bold. There were so many men. If someone tried to take him, she would happily give him away. But alas, she had transmigrated into the imperial palace, becoming the emperor's woman. If she did not compete with the other women, her fate would either be to die a lonely death in the palace or be framed and killed. She did not wish for that. Thus, she would treat the palace as her workplace, the emperor as her boss, and the consorts as colleagues obstructing her promotion. With this mindset, the workaholic Jiang Xinyue immediately regained her vigor. That night in the Hishi Palace, water was summoned 3 times, and it was not until the late night that the emperor finally fell asleep with Consort Jin in his embrace. The next morning, after the emperor attended the morning court session, a stream of rewards flowed to the Hishi Palace. It was after Jiang Xinyue had finished her breakfast that a palace made from the Ikuan Palace arrived. With a curtsy, she said, Consort Jin, the empress is ill, and asked the servant to inform me. There is no need for you to pay respects for the next 3 days. Jiang Xinyue showed concern and guilt. The empress is ill? Could it be from waiting too long outside the cold palace yesterday and catching a cold? The little palace maid quickly shook her head. It has nothing to do with Consort Jin. Our empress has a recurring headache during the winter. The imperial physicians have already been summoned. Only then did Jiang Xinyue breathe a sigh of relief. That's good then. I'll go visit the empress after she recovers, lest I burden her by visiting now while she is ill. The little palace maid smiled. Then this servant shall take her leave. There are still other palaces to notify. This was a subtle way of telling her that the empress valued her, coming to notify her first before the other palaces. Shike smiled and took the little palace maid's hand, slipping her a pouch of silver pieces. Let me see you out, sister. The New Year's banquet was only 3 days away. It seemed the empress was too busy with the preparations to engage in her usual morning banter with the palace consorts. Not having to pay respects was a relief. Jiang Xinyue took off her clothes and had another nap. She slept until lunchtime. The snow had been falling all night and only stopped at noon when she woke up. Shike, Shuangjiang, Jiang Chuan, and Xiao Xuanzi had already built several tall snowmen in the courtyard. Consort Jin was generous, so the palace maids and eunuchs in the Hishi Palace were livelier than those elsewhere. Even when the other palaces were gloomy, this place still had a warm, lively atmosphere. The sound of pleasant laughter drifted in. Jiang Xinyue put on a robe and watched them from the window, smiling. She had to keep receiving the emperor's favor. Only by continuously receiving his favor could she maintain this vibrant atmosphere in her palace. Shike, Shuangjiang, Xiao Xuanzi, and all the palace staff in the Hishi Palace would then be able to live in peace. The lady is awake. Shuangjiang, who had just finished shaping a snowball amidst the laughter and commotion, immediately dropped it. She brushed off the snow from her clothes and entered with Quebec. They stood by the charcoal fire for a moment to dispel the chill before approaching Jiang Xinyue. Why didn't you call us to attend to you when you woke up, my lady? If the palace tutors knew, they would surely flay them alive for breaching protocol. Jiang Xinyue playfully teased Shike. Oh? You were all frolicking outside, while I had no one to attend me by my bedside. Aren't you the ones being improper? Please forgive us, my lady. Shike was unfazed, but Shuangjiang was so frightened that she knelt down. It was my fault. I saw the heavy snow today and wanted to build some snowmen for you to see, so I called Shike and the others to help. Please forgive this servant, my lady. Jiang Xinyue and Shike glanced at each other, and among the three of them, there was indeed one honest person. Shuang Jiang, our lady is just teasing us. Shike helped Shuang Jiang up. My lady, look at yourself. She was truly mischievous. Only then did Shuang Jiang dare to raise her head and look at her mistress's expression. Seeing that she indeed had a smiling countenance, she finally breathed a sigh of relief. My lady, you gave this servant a fright. Kind mistresses were truly rare in the palace. Discover new Tories at C/O. In private, every one of them was difficult to serve. Being able to encounter Consort Jin was a blessing she had cultivated over 3 lifetimes. She did not wish to serve any other mistress. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Report chapter comments. Novel bin read light novel, web novel, Korean novel, and Chinese novel online for free. You can find hundreds of English translated light novel, web novel, Korean novel, and Chinese novel which are daily updated. Read novels online. Read light novel online. Read online free. Free light novel online. Contact TOS, SciMap, donate. A female psychology PhD who time traveled to the royal harem. Chapter 40. The female psychology PhD who time traveled to the royal harem. Chapter 40. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Chapter 40. Today's lunch was Southern cuisine prepared by the imperial chefs, all because Jiang Xinyue mentioned last night that she wanted to savor the delicacies of the South. The staff of the imperial kitchen certainly knew how to return a favor. The courtyard was blanketed in thick white snow. A few palace maids swept the snow in the courtyard, creating a world of silver and white that was enchantingly beautiful. Inspired by the scene, Jiang Xinyue's poetic spirit soared. After much contemplation, she could only muster a line from Song Jiwen's, encountering snow in the garden, I know not if the flakes that fall are today's, or if they're flowers that bloomed in last night's haze. Just as she was about to recite another line, Wang Dequan's figure appeared, walking in from the palace gate. Jiang Xinyue hurriedly dressed herself and sent Shike to greet him. Shike, with her honeyed tongue, greeted him. Eunuch Wang, on such a snowy day, what wind has blown you here? Even this magpie is chirping at your arrival. The implication was that Eunuch Wang's visit surely brought good tidings to the Harmony Palace. Wang Dequan smiled, quite pleased. Has your mistress had her meal yet? Shike pondered whether to say she had or hadn't. Surely the emperor wasn't planning to summon her mistress to dine with him? Wang Dequan, seeing her expression, knew she was overthinking. He waved his duster and said, Vice Minister Jiang is in the imperial study with the emperor, discussing the reception of foreign envoys for the New Year's banquet. The emperor sent me to invite your mistress over. Many consorts who enter the palace never see their families again, but the emperor was particularly fond of Consort Jin and specially sent him to bring her to the imperial study. Though not explicitly stated, wasn't the intention clear? Was she about to meet this body's convenient father? Jiang Xinyue recalled the dynamics between the father and daughter. Fortunately, her convenient father had 5 daughters, each one meticulously groomed to enter the palace, and paved the way for the Jiang family. Jiang Yutong was the legitimate daughter of the Jiang family, originally not slated for palace life. Her convenient father treated his 3 concubine-born daughters as commodities, but didn't count his 2 legitimate ones. It was that fool Jiang Yutong who fell in love with the emperor at first sight during a palace banquet, starving herself and threatening to hang herself, forcing her way into the palace. Only then did her convenient father package her along with the others and send them in. Why couldn't she have transmigrated into Jiang Yutong or her younger sister Jiang Yulin? Being the legitimate daughter of the vice minister of the Ministry of Rights wasn't a low status. She could have married a suitable, handsome young man outside the palace as his primary wife and lived more freely than in the palace. Lost in thought, she arrived at the imperial study. From afar, she saw two slightly hunched figures talking to the emperor. Her sixth sense told Jiang Xinyue that the tall, thin middle-aged man on the left, with a somewhat upright and handsome back of the head, was her convenient father. After all, someone who could produce such a beautiful daughter couldn't possibly be the short, fat, gray-haired old man on the right. Your subject greets your majesty. A gentle, clear voice rang out. Vice Minister Jiang and the officials turned around to see an exquisitely beautiful palace lady curtsying gracefully. Vice Minister Jiang smiled. Greetings, Consort Jin. Father, please don't be so formal. Beloved, come to my side, the Xuanwu Emperor called. Jiang Xinyue only had time for a close look at her convenient father before quickly walking towards the Xuanwu Emperor. As expected of this body's birth father, he was indeed quite handsome, sword-like eyebrows, star-like eyes, and deep-set features. In modern terms, he would be called a high-contrast beauty. But her convenient father was a high-contrast handsome man. Jiang Xinyue's features seemed to combine the best of her father and mother. Beautiful yet pure, lovely yet alluring, both innocent and sensual, 4 parts resembling Vice Minister Jiang. The remaining 6 parts must take after her mother, the great beauty whose fame echoed throughout the capital. Did the Xuanwu Emperor call her here just for a father-daughter reunion? Follow Iwa's stories at nvl/by/n.com. Impossible. He wasn't that kind-hearted. Vice Minister Jiang has a fine daughter. My consort Jin has brought me many surprises since entering the palace. The roasted meat and fried chicken we discussed earlier with our beloved ministers were her ideas. The 12-lady orchestra at the banquet was also her arrangement. We think it might be clearer if she explains it herself. In Ikuin Palace. Finyon looked worriedly at the sickly-faced Empress Ju, half lying in bed. Your Highness, Consort Jin has been in the imperial study all afternoon and hasn't come out yet. Empress Ju, her face deathly pale, coughed a few times before saying, the Minister of Rights and Vice Minister Jiang are in the imperial study. His Majesty is showing her kindness, finding an opportunity for her to see her father. Finyon pouted, Your Highness. First the cold palace welcome, now the imperial study arrangement. Isn't the Emperor paying her too much attention? Remembering the Emperor's warning last night, Empress Ju coughed more severely. Finyon hurriedly patted her back. After a while, Empress Ju said, I remind myself time and again not to underestimate anyone in the harem, yet I've repeatedly underestimated her. Let's wait and see. If she's as ambitious as concubine Li, I absolutely won't tolerate her. Even if the Emperor would be displeased, she must maintain her authority head of the harem. After all, the Emperor had never had any real feelings for her. It was just an alliance of interests. She had the right to maintain her dignity, and the Emperor must give her face. Emperor and Empress, they were one entity. Today, there was neither moon nor stars. The sky was gloomy, with a sense of impending storm. Jiang Xinyue walked side by side with her convenient father. The Emperor had specially permitted her to see her convenient father out of the palace. Taking advantage of the moment on the way, they could chat a bit about family matters. She didn't really care about the Jiang family's well-being, but having occupied Jiang Xinyue's body, she felt obliged to show some filial piety. After much hesitation, she broke the silence. Father, how are Aunt Wan, Brother Zhe, and Yen's sister? Vice Minister Jiang stopped walking, and Jiang Xinyue followed suit. Your legitimate sister's death. Did you have anything to do with it? This is what your stepmother asked me to inquire. When news of Yutong's death reached home, your stepmother went mad, insisting on beating your aunt and Yen's sister to death. I know your life in the palace is difficult, so I'll only ask you one thing. Did you personally do it? No, Jiang Xinyue replied. It was her own stupidity. She lost the Emperor's favor, was instigated by others, and came to my palace in red clothes to hang herself, hoping to become a vengeful ghost and kill me. Your word is enough. Vice Minister Jiang smiled gently. I will take good care of your aunt, brother, and sister. You focus on serving the Emperor well. Your father will handle everything at home. Jiang Xinyue nodded. At least her convenient father had said one humane thing. You've been in the palace for nearly half a year now. I hear His Majesty dotes on you quite a bit. Why is there no movement in your belly yet? In the depths of the palace, it's better to have an imperial prince by your side. To pave the way for your career, I suppose? Just a moment ago, she was a human, and in an instant, she turned back into a dog. But Jiang Xinyue still agreed, playing the role of the obedient and filial daughter to perfection. After all, it was her womb, and whether she wanted to conceive or not was entirely her decision. She couldn't be bothered to argue with these people. They chatted a bit more about Brother Zay's recent situation before the palace gates loomed before them. Whether it was the lingering emotions of this body or something else, Jiang Xinyue felt a lump in her throat, and tears threatened to fall for no apparent reason. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Report chapter comments. Novel been read light novel, web novel. The female psychology PhD who time traveled to the royal harem. Chapter 41. The female psychology PhD who time traveled to the royal harem. Chapter 41. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Chapter 41. Vice Minister Jiang bowed deeply to Jiang Xinyue, his eyes slightly reddened. My lady, this is where I must leave you. It will soon be dark, and the road is treacherous. Be careful not to trip and fall. When you were young, you were always the clumsiest among your sisters, constantly stumbling. In the palace, take good care of yourself. This place is not like home. If you fall, there will be no one to pick you up but yourself, for your father cannot embrace you here. LL new asterize at N0V/LBI/CM. These words carried several layers of meaning. Though there was an undertone of selling his daughter for glory, there remained a semblance of a father's love. Tears streamed down Jiang Xinyue's face as she returned the farewell bow. Father, take care of our family and yourself. Your daughter will not disappoint you. Let us part here. Turning away, father and daughter simultaneously wiped the tears from their faces, their expressions equally cold and indifferent. Had Wang Dequan witnessed this, he would have remarked, truly, a family of drama queens. The Hishi Palace was brightly lit. The Xuanwu Emperor, holding a copy of the Book of Lord Shang, sat by Jiang Xinyue's bedside. Hearing a sound, he looked up and smiled. You're back. Hungry? I've ordered supper. Will you join me? The red-eyed beauty's lackluster expression suddenly shone with a dazzling radiance. In a flash, she threw herself into the Xuanwu Emperor's embrace. She held him tightly, burying her nose in his chest. After a long while, she lifted her head, her eyes shimmering like a shattered frozen lake, exuding an exquisite beauty. Your Majesty, you have been so good to your humble servant. I grow fonder of you each day. What shall I do? The ancients were reserved in expressing love, seldom voicing it aloud. But Jiang Xinyue followed a different creed. Love should be boldly proclaimed. Even if she did not love, she would flatter with honeyed words until the recipient was utterly besotted. Was this not the way of the scoundrels of later ages, deceiving maidens with their silver tongues, leaving them spellbound? Evidently, it is human nature to crave sweet words. Even emperors are not exempt. Though Jiang Xinyue did not know why she had dreamed of the emperor's childhood while unconscious, it was a golden opportunity bestowed by the heavens, not to be wasted. If he lacked love, she would give him love in abundance. If he did not speak of love, she would express her affection for him daily. Let him know that in this world, no one else could love him so unreservedly, like a moth drawn to a flame. So my beloved only had a little fondness for me before? The Xuanwu Emperor embraced her, teasing. What must my beloved do to give me all of her affection? Jiang Xinyue gazed at him with tender adoration. Bashfully, she reached up, cupping his face and gently pulling it down. Rising on her tiptoes, she placed a loving kiss upon his eyes. According to the customs of my aunt's family, when a woman kisses a man's eyes, it means she wishes to enter his heart and offer him her boundless love. Her voice trembled, as if she had summoned great courage. Nervous, she looked at him, her heart and eyes filled with love for him alone. My darling, will you accept this ardent heart of mine? Addressing him intimately, referring to herself humbly, her passion was fervent and true. Xian was the emperor's given name. Meeting her expectant gaze, the Xuanwu emperor felt, for the first time, a desire to flee. Such candid, straightforward declaration of love made him feel as though he had been carefully placed in her heart, truly and deeply loved. He had never experienced such a novel sensation, as if his very heart had been set afire. Silently, he drew her into a tight embrace, avoiding a direct answer. I like hearing you call me my darling. Say it again for me, would you? If there was a woman destined to enter his heart, he hoped it would be his precious consort Jin. At that moment, he thought not of concubine Li or Empress Ju. The woman who had kissed his eyes had won a cherished place unlike any other. Truly, bestowing upon her the honorific Jin Precious had been his most prudent decision. The dog emperor evaded and changed the subject, a sign of discomfiture. No matter. Jiang Xinhua rallied herself. One day, she would reign supreme over the imperial harem, forcing the dog emperor to kneel and sing conquest to her. The courtyard of the Hishi palace was blanketed in white. As the Xuanwu emperor rose, he planted a kiss upon Jiang Xinyue's eyes, as if answering her question from the night before. After quietly getting up, the Xuanwu emperor did not forget to instruct Wang Dequan. Go to my treasury and bestow upon consort Jin the white fox fur cloak tribute by the Jin kingdom last year. What? Wang Dequan's eyes widened in disbelief. The previous year, the Jin kingdom had tribute many fox fur cloaks, yellow, gray, and multicolored varieties. But among them, the most precious was the sole white fox fur cloak. This cloak was not easily obtained. It had been made from the underarm fur of foxes from Mount Wanhu in Jin, requiring immense resources and labor. The saying, gathering underarm fur to make a cloak, originated from this very item. The previous year, not only the Empress and concubine Li, but even the ailing Grand Empress in the Xinning Palace expressed a subtle desire for this cloak. Yet His Majesty had not given it to anyone, instead keeping it in his private treasury. And now, he wished to bestow it upon consort Jin? Wang Dequan's astonishment was too apparent. The Xuanwu Emperor frowned displeasedly and with a glance that caused Wang Dequan to immediately respond. This servant will have it sent over right away. No hurry. The Xuanwu Emperor slipped on his boots, glancing again at Jiang Xinyue. Wait until I return from the morning court session. You will deliver it personally. To demonstrate the Emperor's favor, his gaze lingered on Jiang Xinyue's abdomen, and his brow furrowed once more. Vice Minister Jiang had been an unfit father, allowing his own daughter to suffer such hardship in her youth, letting his principal wife bully and oppress her. He wished for this woman to bear his offspring, to enjoy lifelong wealth and prosperity, peace and happiness. Only after the Xuanwu Emperor's gaze left her did Jiang Xinyue stretch languorously and emerge from the thick bedding. Shuangjiang thought her lady had impeccable timing for rising, always about an hour after His Majesty's departure. Today, there was no need for the morning greetings. Without having to dress early, Jiang Xinhua, her hair unbound, gathered with Shike and a few others around a table for a game of shuangluk. This was an ancient Chinese board game played with dice, similar in spirit to the modern-day game of Ludo or Parcheesi. Players raced to be the first to move all their pieces off the board according to the rolls of the dice. Playing chess dryly was a bit dull, so Jiang Xinhua turned it into a flying chess game, incorporating many interesting elements. Shuang Jiang and Shike were both playing excitedly, sighing one moment and shrieking with laughter the next, creating a harmonious atmosphere. What are they playing? Asked Consort Da, leading the second princess over. From a distance, they could hear the laughter coming from Heshi Palace. After Jiang Xinhua rose and paid her respects, she pulled the second princess along, saying, Come, second princess, shall Consort Jin teach you how to play flying chess? What is flying chess? It's this game. Learn it well, and you can play it with the third prince when you return. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Report chapter comments. Novel bit red light novel. The female psychology PhD who time traveled to the royal harem. Chapter 42. The female psychology PhD who time traveled to the royal harem. Chapter 42. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Chapter 42. Consort de watched for a while and also found it quite interesting, estimating that the second princess could play for an entire day. Only then did she feel reassured, saying, "Younger sister Lao, please help sister take care of the second princess. Empress Ju probably has some matters she wants to pass on to me regarding the arrangements for the New Year's banquet." Empress Ju could not handle it all by herself, so she called her trusted confidants Consort Liang and Consort Da to help manage palace affairs. Jiang Xinyue waved her hand nonchalantly. All right, all right. This consort will take good care of the second princess. Sister Da, you should go quickly. Please send my regards to the Empress. Consort Da smiled and shook her head helplessly. She truly was childlike. No wonder the children adored her so much. They saw Concubine Jin as a playmate of the same age. After Consort De left, the eldest princess and the third prince arrived as well. Shike, Shuang Jiang, and little Xiao Xuanzi stopped playing and allowed the three young masters to join Concubine Jin. When Wang Dequan carefully presented the white fox fur robe, the four were so engrossed in play that they burst into unrestrained laughter, quite unbecoming. Precious consort Jin, this servant has brought you the emperor's reward. The four paused, and Jiang Xinyue walked over first. What reward is this? Wang Dequan extended his hands, revealing a soft, snow-white fox fur robe. The robe was completely pristine, almost blinding under the sunlight, with a slender cut and a pale apricot collar embroidered with peony flowers and fastenings. The hat had a full ring of fox fur trim that could envelop her little face, protecting her from the wind and cold. Even Jiang Xinyue, who was used to modern synthetic and real mink and fox fur coats from the future world, was amazed by this exquisite work of art. The wisdom of the ancients sometimes exceeded modern people's imagination. At least Jiang Xinyue felt that modern people would never make a true coat entirely out of white fox fur. They would mix an 80% synthetic fur, then charge you a heartbreaking 80,000. Especially in this non-existent Daiyuan dynasty, dressed in Qing-style banners with Qing hairstyles and lotus shoes, the entire nation probably couldn't find 5 white foxes. It was evident that this reward was extraordinary. The emperor said that precious consort Jin should wear this fox fur robe to the New Year's banquet, as the evening banquet will be held outdoors. He doesn't want you to catch a chill. Shike took the reward, and Wang Dequan cautioned further. Precious consort, when you're not wearing it, be sure to store it carefully. This is the only fox fur robe in the entire Daiyuan court. It was truly precious. If it wasn't treated like a national treasure, a shrewd man like Wang Dequan would not have said so. Jiang Xinyue nodded. Thank you for the reminder, Honorable Wang. This palace understands. After seeing Wang Dequan off, the eldest princess, second princess, and third prince gathered around, staring at the dazzlingly bright white fox fur robe, exclaiming in awe. But none dared to touch it. Although Jiang Xinyue knew it was precious, clothes were meant to be worn, right? She directly reached out, gave the robe a swoosh, and draped it over herself in one smooth, dance-like motion. Especially since she was aware of her own beauty, she twirled on the spot. The white snow and white fur robe complemented each other brilliantly, making the beautiful woman resemble a snow fox that had taken human form after descending from the snowy mountains. Really enchanting. This white fox fur robe simply belonged to her. Everyone present felt that no one else could do justice to its pure, unblemished color. It was not the clothes adorning the person, but the person adorning the clothes. Consort Jin looked breathtakingly beautiful. The third prince was awestruck. Consort Jin looks like a fairy descending to the mortal realm. Jiang Xinyue pinched his nose. Our third prince certainly has an eye for beauty. She had transmigrated from the 21st century, so wasn't she a fairy descending to the mortal realm? The eldest princess and second princess looked on enviously, but their gazes were clear and without malice. Regardless of how vicious or hypocritical the consorts of the rear palace could be, these children were all raised exceptionally well. It was said that after the age of 7, princes and princesses would study, live, and receive guidance in the Prince's Academy, with teachers personally selected by the emperor. The servants attending to the princes were also from the Changjian Palace. It seemed the Xuanwu Emperor was aware of the miscellaneous characters in his rear palace and feared the consorts would corrupt the princes and princesses, so he made preparations early. Like today, when the Prince's Academy was closed for a break, they came to play at Concubine Jin's palace. Their curiosity about the fox fur robe lasted only a short while. After Jiang Xinyue took it off, they went back to playing double sixes. Concubine Jin always won, so the three of them teamed up, determined to defeat her this time. Your Highness, on the way back from the Imperial Garden to the Changxing Palace, Consort Zhang gritted her teeth so hard that her silver tooth was about to break. She had been demoted from noble consort Wan to consort Zhang for interfering in state affairs and angering the emperor. Meanwhile, the root cause of it all, Zhen, had been elevated to precious consort Zhen. Read latest OVLS at ev/e/l/by.com. Not only did the Empress treat her with kindness, but the Emperor also doted on her immensely. Earlier, she had run into Wang Dequan carrying something carefully towards the Hishi Palace. It could only be a reward from the Emperor for precious consort Jin. She took a few deep breaths, reminding herself to remain calm. Precious consort Jin held a more important place in the Emperor's heart than she had imagined. She could not act rashly again. Otherwise, her fate would not be much better than Jiang Yuan's. She had seen through concubinely. When she sent them to charge ahead, she would merely make empty promises. If something happened, she would not help them. Forget it. Consort Zhang shook her handkerchief and tucked her hands into her furry sleeves. Let's go back. That night, it was supposed to be the Hishi Palace's turn to keep the lamps lit, but noble consort Rong from a side palace of the Changxing Palace was suddenly revealed to be 2 months pregnant. Concubine Li sent someone to summon the emperor over. Although Shuang Jiang was young, she was an elder in the palace. After closing the palace gates, she sighed. Consort Rong is pregnant. The Xinang Palace side will probably be causing trouble again. Jiang Xinhua looked over curiously. Before she could speak, Shike had already asked on her behalf, "What do you mean by that?" Shuang Jiang glanced around and leaned in to whisper, "Consort Rong and noble consort Rong are the emperor's cousins, the nieces of the Empress Dowager's family. Previously, when the emperor dealt with the Wu family, the Empress Dowager was furious and closed the gates of the Xinang Palace, claiming illness and refusing to come out. But this servant believes she is not one to relinquish power so easily. Consort Rong's sudden pregnancy is a sign that the Empress Dowager intends to resurface." Jiang Xinyue's eyes lit up. Not bad. Even Shuang Jiang can make you think of so much. Your Highness. The little maid stamped her feet. This servant is reminding you. That person in Xinang Palace is no good. You must be wary of noble consort Rong's sharp tongue. Otherwise you will suffer. Really? Jiang Xinyue narrowed her eyes and smiled. Me? The thing I fear least is suffering a loss. The old saying goes well, suffering loss is a blessing. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Report chapter comments. Novel been read light novel, web novel. The female psychology PhD who time traveled to the royal harem. Chapter 43. The female psychology PhD who time traveled to the royal harem. Chapter 43. Previous chapter. Next chapter. The Wu family was the one Jiang Xinyue saw in her coma, the same family that Wu Qingyi, who bullied the young emperor, belonged to. She believed that if she suffered a few more losses and staged more accidents at the hands of the Wu family, the emperor would compensate her in some other way. However, there was one thing she found very strange. Why does consort Rome, who comes from a noble background and is the maternal cousin of the Empress Dowager, lived in the side palace of Changxin Palace, despite being a consort. Shuang Jiang seemed hesitant to speak, but finally mustered the courage, covered her mouth with her hand, and whispered into Jiang Xinyue's ear, "The emperor dislikes the Wu family." When the Wu family was raided, Consort Rong knelt outside the Changqian palace until her knees bled, but she couldn't change the emperor's mind. Concubine Li, who had an old grudge with Consort Rong from their youth, took her under the guise of goodwill and placed her in the side palace of Changxin Palace. The emperor didn't say anything. At that time, the Empress Dowager was too preoccupied with her own affairs to care about where Consort Rong was placed. By the time she reacted, everything had already been settled. In terms of being politically savvy, Noble Consort Rong was much smarter than Consort Rong, which is why Noble Consort Rong still had some favor. The emperor might not say it out loud, but he still had some affection for his cousin, with whom he had grown up. The strange thing was, the one who was pregnant was not the favored noble Consort Rome, but Consort Rome, who had long lost the emperor's favor. The relationship between these two sisters was worth scrutinizing. The snow in the courtyard of Hishi Palace had not melted, unlike in Changxin Palace. Concubine Li disliked the cold and snowy weather, so the palace had been cleaned up early. The bluestone path was damp. As Concubine Li came out to greet the Xuanwu Emperor, her skirt was stained with dirty snow and mud. "How is Consort Rong?" "This morning, she fainted when she came to pay her respects to me. It scared me half to death. The imperial physician said it was a joyful pulse when he came to take her pulse. Consort Rong has been saying that she hasn't been resting well lately, so it must be because of this." The Xuanwu Emperor nodded, his footsteps already entering the side hall. Consort Rong was leaning against the head of the bed, drinking the nourishing soup fed to her by the palace maid. Seeing the emperor and Concubine Li enter together, she tried to get up to pay her respects, but was held down by the Xuanwu Emperor. "You are weak, no need for formalities." Consort Rong's eyes reddened, and she lowered her gaze, no longer speaking. The only sound in the room was the faint sound of her drinking soup. After sitting for a while, the Xuanwu Emperor felt awkward and stood up to instruct Wang Dequan. "Remember to go to Xinang Palace tomorrow to announce the good news to the Empress Dowager." Wang Dequan didn't even lift his eyelids. He bowed respectfully. "Your servant obeys." The Empress Dowager had always blamed the Emperor for not showing enough favor to Consort Rong and noble Consort Rong. Now that Consort Rong was pregnant, her resentment towards the Emperor should lessen. Concubine Li held onto the Xuanwu Emperor's arm. "Your Majesty, let Consort Rong rest well. It's getting late. I have prepared hot and spicy soup at my place. If your Majesty doesn't mind, you can come to my place to have a bowl of soup to warm up." "If my beloved concubine says so, wouldn't she be heartbroken if I didn't go?" Concubine Li gave the emperor a playful glance and left the side hall arm in arm with him. Mei Xiang closed the door, her eyes red with anger. "Look at her, flaunting herself. You're the one who's pregnant, not her. What's she so pleased about? The emperor clearly wanted to spend time with you today, and she just had to come and steal him away. She's utterly shameless. EAD new chapter us on no/b/e/ellen.com. Mei Xiang. Tears fell like crystal beads. Consort Rong closed her eyes. "Enough. What good would it do if the emperor stayed? You want me to grovel and please the man who killed my father." She had said too much. When Consort Rong opened her eyes again, the deep, unshakable sorrow in them was hidden. She looked at the door, her eyes as cold as ice. The women who fall in love with a king are the most pitiful. They see a world of beauty and splendor, but it's all rotten on the inside. When she looked at Concubine Li, she saw nothing but a beautiful corpse. Mei Xiang knew her mistress was thinking of sad things again and sighed. Even if you don't think about yourself, you should think about the child in your belly. Now that you're pregnant, there are many in the palace who see you as a thorn in their side. If you don't pull yourself together, how can the little prince be born safely?" Her words seemed to touch Consort Rong. She touched her flat belly. unable to believe that there was a tiny life inside her. She gave a beautiful smile. You're right, I need to pull myself together. I hope it's a little princess. She didn't want her child to be caught up in the power struggle between the Empress Dowager and the Emperor. The next morning, Jiang Xingyue got up early for once. From her hair and jewelry to her clothes and makeup, everything was carefully chosen. Shike and Shuang Jiang helped her get dressed, and they were so amazed they couldn't speak. They had never realized their mistress was so skilled at makeup. The pearl powder on her face was applied so subtly it looked like she wasn't wearing any, making her skin look rosy and smooth. And her eyebrows were not the thin, delicate ones she usually wore, but thick, wild ones. They arched slightly at the peak and tapered to a sharp point at the end, adding a striking beauty to her face that was dazzling to behold. Her high, delicate nose, her full, rosy lips, her small face with its pair of almond eyes that sparkled and shone, were all captivating. Her face was naturally fair and flawless, but she had added a mole under her eye and on her cheek, which made her radiant features even more charming and alluring. She didn't need to make any expressions to turn heads. Shike couldn't help but praise her. Mistress, you're going to outshine all the other ladies in the palace today. Jiang Xinyue touched the luxurious necklace around her neck and smiled like a fox. I can't let such a beautiful face go to waste. The Xuanwu Emperor had hinted that she should dress up for the New Year's banquet. How could she disappoint her boss? At Yanqing Palace, concubine Su was delighted to receive a gorgeous dress from the weaving bureau. Xu Hua frowned when she saw it. Mistress, the pattern on this, it seems to break the palace rules. You're a seventh rank concubine, but this six-petal flower pattern is only for concubines of fifth rank or above. As she spoke, tears fell from concubine Sue's eyes once again. This is the dress sent by the weaving bureau for me to wear at tonight's New Year's banquet. I suppose it's somewhat luxurious. Shuwa, do you also think, like others, that I'm not favored enough to deserve such beautiful attire? It was as if she would burst into a great sob if Shuwa attempted to deny her the dress. Shuwa felt a chill on her scalp. She had been serving this master for just 3 or 4 months, and had already witnessed what it meant to be a beauty as fickle as water. The old nanny behind Shuwa shook her head at her, signaling her not to get involved in the palace disputes. How could the people from the weaving bureau not know that this six-layered palace satin could only be worn by concubines of the fifth rank or above? Knowing this, why did they deliver it here? It was clear that someone was setting up Concubine Sue. Concubine Sue was naive and dim-witted, and the palace maids serving in Yanqing Palace were all considering finding a new mistress. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Report chapter comments. Novel been read light novel, web. Female psychology PhD who time traveled to the royal harem. Chapter 44. The female psychology PhD who time traveled to the royal harem. Chapter 44. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Next video in 5. Cancel. The palace could not tolerate those who betrayed their master, but if the master was already dead, those things would no longer matter. At concubine Sue's unwillingness to hand over the calligraphy and paintings, she could only let out a sigh. Concubine Sue saw that Jiang Xinyue did not speak, and she raised her chin triumphantly, admiring the pale apricot-colored embroidered jade hairpin and magnificent robes on herself, unable to let go. No wonder everyone in the palace wanted to climb higher. The higher the position, the more beautiful the clothes and the more luxurious the jewelry. Which woman could resist such temptation? During the day, banquets were held in the palace, tended by ministers from the court, who dined with the emperor in Taiha Hall, sharing the same joy between monarch and subjects. Fortunately, it was sunny today, not too cold, and fire pits were lit in Taiha Hall, so the arriving ministers could take off their cloaks. Envoys from the 4 nations had also brought their families, but this was the battlefield for men, engaging in verbal warfare, with no one daring to bring their families inside. Only when night fell did luxurious carriages from various households gradually appear at the palace gates. Jiang Yulin secretly lifted a carriage curtain, marveling at the majestic palace in awe. Slap. Soon, the back of her hand was struck as the noblewoman in a silver-gray patterned robe glared coldly at her. Uncouth behavior. Have you forgotten what I told you before entering the palace? Only then did Jiang Yulin's excited expression subside. Your daughter remembers. Mother said for me to serve the emperor in the palace, to replace Jiang Xinyue. Lady Zhou nodded. Although your father said your sister wasn't killed by her, but why should your sister die while she gains imperial favor? Since she didn't save your sister, you will avenge your sister's death. To be honest, when Jiang Yulin thought of Jiang Xinyue's beauty that made all things in the world pale in comparison, she felt a lack of confidence. But in front of her stern mother, she dared not voice her doubts, or else she would be scolded again. Things like sapping others' ambition and diminishing one's own authority, and relying on beauty to receive favors, which cannot last forever. More importantly, Jiang Xinyue was so cunning. In the past at home, her sister would bully her, but looking back, the one scolded most harshly by their father was the one who bullied her the worst. She was adept at feigning innocence in front of their father. Lost in thought, eunuchs had already arrived to invite them to disembark, and after passing through Taiwan Gate, they would walk to Bower Hall. There were exceptions, such as Lady Wang, the Empress's mother, and Lady Pei, the mother of Consort Li. They had special sedan chairs to be carried in, earning envious glances as they were carried through Taiwan Gate, heading to Ikuan Palace and Chongqing Palace, respectively. Jiang Yulin rolled her eyes. Wasn't it said that Jiang Xinyue was also highly favored? Why didn't she send a sedan chair for you, mother? Lady Zhou sneered. No matter how favored she is, she's just a lowly guerra without the status to ride in a sedan chair. How could she send one for us? So she's not that impressive. Jiang Yulin pursed her lips. Once she entered the palace, she would definitely win the emperor's heart, making him love only her from then on. You are different from her. Lady Zhou patted her head. You are the legitimate daughter, while her lowly birth means she cannot be compared to you. If it weren't for Aunt Ruan's beauty, she would have died on some corrupt official's bed long ago, let alone have the fortune to marry into their family as the lady. A plaything's daughter could only be a plaything. Inside Bauha Hall, a golden carpet was laid on the main hall, with red couplets and lanterns hung all around, exuding a festive New Year atmosphere. The pillars were round, with a carved dragon connecting each pair, its head protruding from the eaves and its tail extending into the hall, perfectly combining functionality and decoration to enhance the emperor's majestic aura. As it was the grandest and most joyous festival of the year, everyone was dressed up, with beauties and scholars everywhere, an unprecedented scene. The emperor would certainly not be the first to arrive, but at this hour, all officials and their families had already gathered. Jiang Xinyue checked her attire again to ensure there were no flaws, then put on her fox fur cloak and walked out with Shikei's help. My lady! My lady! The little eunuch Xian hurried in from outside, his joy barely contained. Wang Dequan has arrived. And he didn't come alone, bringing a great reward. Jiang Xinyue quickened her steps and saw an ornate palanquin waiting outside the gates of Hishi Palace. 5¼ feet high, with a seat 2¼ feet high. For shafts, painted red. 2 middle shafts, 2 side shafts. The canopy towered 3¾ feet, with 4 pillars 5¼ feet long and 4 red curtains. Each curtain was intricately carved with gold flowers and figures of deities and immortals. Wang Dequan, what is this? Jiang Xinyue was puzzled, as her rank and status did not entitle her to ride in a palanquin. Wang Dequan bowed humbly with a smile. Today, Sinang Palace rewarded Consort Rong with a palanquin. The Emperor, mindful that you were previously poisoned and might still be unwell, instructed the servant to retrieve another palanquin from the Internal Affairs Department and deliver it to Hishi Palace. The hour is late, so please allow yourself to be carried, Lady Jiang. Excellent. Very good. Even before she had a chance to cause trouble for scening palace and consort Rome, the emperor had decided to make her a target. How should I put this? If used well, it would be entirely beneficial for her without any harm. If used poorly, it could be a double-edged sword, potentially harming the Empress Dowager or herself. From another perspective, Emperor Xuanwu was giving her a choice. She might even get promoted again. Excellent. I can work with this. Jiang Xinyue gave Wang Dequan a sweet smile, an innocent look, as 4 eunuchs carried her towards Bawa Hall. Along the way, the palace ladies and maids they encountered all lowered their heads, not daring to gaze directly at Jiang Xinyue's exquisite, unparalleled beauty. Could that be consortly? It must be. I've heard consortly is the most beautiful in the harem. Just now that lady's divine looks were unmatched. If not consortly, then who else? Ah, my father wanted me to attend the selection in 3 years, and hired an instructor to teach me palace etiquette at home. But seeing how youthful and gorgeous consortly is, she could remain favored for at least 20 more years. Maybe I should persuade my father against sending me to the palace after all. Same for me. How could a small jade like me possibly outshine the sun and moon? Shike and Shuang Jiang both looked up. My lady, should we go tell them you are not consortly? Jiang Xinyue shook her head nonchalantly, half leaning against the sedan chair, exuding a lazy and sensual demeanor. No need. Once we reach Bawa Hall, who won't know my identity? It was better to let them mistake her identity first, so that when they learned the truth, they would be utterly shocked. Wouldn't it be more credible for them to learn about her from others than from her own mouth? Precious Beauty arrives. Visit Novelbind. C.M for updates. As the small eunuch finished singing, Jiang Xinyue's sedan chair stopped outside the archway. She was assisted in alighting by Shike and Shuang Jiang, her snow-white attire causing a commotion among the crowd. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Report chapter comments. Novel been read light novel, web novel, Korean novel, and Chinese novel online for free. You can find hundreds of English translated The Female Psychology PhD Who Time Traveled to the Royal Harem. Chapter 45. The Female Psychology PhD Who Time Traveled to the Royal Harem. Chapter 45. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Who is this? Such exquisite beauty. When did such a remarkable figure emerge from the imperial harem? A closer look. She bears a resemblance to concubine Li. Your standards, my friend? This lady appears far lovelier than concubine Li. To describe it precisely, concubine Li is an abstract beauty, while the one before us is a realist beauty. The implication being that the lady in white before them was more delicate and particular, whereas concubine Li had only a general semblance of beauty that faded upon closer inspection. Am I seeing things? She seems to be wearing the white fox fur robe that the Jin Kingdom gifted to the Emperor last year. What? The one that the Emperor treasured and never gave to anyone. Some ladies well acquainted with Lady Joe grabbed her hand, both confirming and doubting. Lady Joe. Does that imperial consort not bear a striking resemblance to your niece, Sister Yu? Did your family send Sister Tong and Sister Yu to the palace during the early summer selection this year? If so, that would undoubtedly be Jiang Xinyue. For a moment, Lady Zhou was taken aback, finding it hard to believe that the seemingly sacred and untouchable imperial consort was the same pitiful girl from her household. Alas, in the palace setting, she could not lose composure. Otherwise, she would have rushed over to examine closely whether this was indeed a vixen wearing a human mask. How could the harsh palace life allow her to grow more beautiful? LA test NOVLS on and bell by slash co. Seeing Lady Zhou's cold silence as she glared at the consort, and the absence of the eldest legitimate daughter of the Jiang family, the others began to sense what was amiss. Lady Zhou must be resentful towards the favored consort from a lowly background. Vice Minister Jiang was an astute man, but his wife had a narrow perspective, sadly. Such an otherworldly beauty born into another family would undoubtedly be cherished as a rare treasure. One who could bring rise or fall, glory or ruin to a clan. No matter how disliked, they would be forced to put on a smile. The palace ladies eyed the fox fur robe adorning Consort Jin, their gazes filled with envy and resentment. What sorcery did this vile woman use to make the emperor repeatedly break rules for her? They had all just witnessed Consort Jin arriving in a palanquin. Palace rules clearly stated that only consorts of the fourth rank or higher were permitted to use palanquins. As a mere concubine of the fourth rank, how dare she ride one without the emperor's permission? First the fox fur robe, then the palanquin. Even some of the higher ranked consorts felt jealous, remarking acidly, Consort Jin is truly the apple of the emperor's eye. That fur robe evaded everyone's grasp, yet it found its way exclusively to her. Some were eager to deliver it right to her palace. Wang Dequan pretended not to hear the eager remark, observing outwardly while inwardly feeling anxious. He was merely a humble servant following the emperor's orders. The consort needn't direct her ire towards him. His Imperial Majesty arrives. Her Imperial Majesty the Empress arrives. The little eunuch's announcement allowed Wang Dequan to breathe a sigh of relief as he swiftly returned to the emperor's side. Jiang Xinyue's position was arranged after Consort Jean and before Consort Zheng, with wolves before and tigers behind. Yet she remained perfectly poised as she took her seat. Shike and Shuang Jiang stood vigilant guard, wary of any ill intentions from the others that might soil their mistress's fur robe. Despite the warm spring-like atmosphere in Bowa Hall, Jiang Xinyue had no need for the fur robe to ward off the cold. After flaunting it for all to see and garnering enough attention, she removed it and handed it to a young maid to carry on her arm, retreating to a less crowded corner. That should do it. An imperial gift could not be carelessly damaged or lost. If anyone dared to ruin her fur robe, there would be heads to roll. Oh! Someone glanced between Concubine Sue and Consort Jet, suddenly exclaiming, Concubine Sue, why is your dress identical to Consort Jet's? This was impossible. The dresses of the harem consorts were all produced jointly by the Weaving Bureau and Office of Music and Dance. The colors and patterns each consort wore were strictly regulated. There could be no mix-up. Everyone turned to look at Jiang Xinyue and Concubine Sue, but they quickly realized that in a case of matching outfits, beauty determined the awkwardness. Consort Jun's tall and graceful figure, her elegant bearing, flattered the peach-colored dress embroidered with jade hairpins and floral designs, accentuating her curvaceous figure. Her snow-white skin outshone the dress itself, complemented by her rosy lips, truly a bewitching sight. With her bejeweled hair ornaments and overall air of opulence, one felt she was naturally meant to be so beautiful, refined, and captivatingly gorgeous. In contrast, Concubine Sue's plain appearance, without any additional adornments, her hair simply tied back with a dangling pink tassel, she aimed for an aloof, scholarly air. Viewed alone, she was still quite lovely, even more radiant than usual. But her opponent was Jiang Xinyue. Plain porridge could not compare to abalone and lobster. There was no basis for comparison between the two. From the throne above, the Xuanwu Emperor had clearly taken notice, his brow furrowing slightly as he gestured for someone to approach and receive his command. Take Concubine Sue away. We mustn't upset Consort Jin. Without the Emperor's consent, she had violated palace rules and must be disciplined. Not everyone could be treated like Consort Jin. Concubine Sue was gagged and escorted away. After the small interruption, the banquet formally commenced. At Wang Dequan's resonant call of, let the banquet begin, palace maids streamed in, carrying a feast of delectable dishes. Jiang Xinyue's roasted meats and fried chicken were indeed among them, prominently positioned as if the featured cuisine. In hindsight, she should have opted for a hot pot instead. With so many gathered around one table, it would have saved money for the emperor's treasury. Talented and beautiful singers and dancers from the Office of Music and Dance skillfully performed to the accompaniment of music, creating a lively and joyous atmosphere. Jiang Yulin stared unblinkingly at Jiang Xinyue, struggling to accept that the girl who once had to curry favor with her mother had become a consort so favored by the emperor that he would speak up for her without a word from Jiang Xinyue herself. The Xuanwu Emperor's handsome countenance and unparalleled majesty made Jiang Yulin's heart flutter with admiration. Time waits for no one. Among those present who wished to enter the palace as imperial consorts, who would want to wait 3 more years for the next selection and endure years of hardship without earning the emperor's favor? They would much rather gain the emperor's attention as the chosen one, thereby gaining an advantage from the start. Chique heated the roasted meats on a small brazier, wrapping them in chili rings and garlic slices according to Jiang Xinyue's preferences. However, Jiang Xinyue shook her head. No garlic, please. She might need to be in close proximity to the Xuanwu Emperor later, and if her breath smelled of garlic, her efforts today would be in vain. Although her kind father had thoughtfully provided a cup of lemon water for her to rinse her mouth, she would play it safe and avoid garlic altogether this evening. Concubine Li came along with the Emperor and Empress Ju, her position being directly to the left of the Emperor. The ladies who had just been discussing Jiang Xinyue on the palace path opened their round eyes in apparent shock. That wasn't really Consort Li? She's Consort Jin. I knew it with her looks. It was only a matter of time before she entered the palace. She's the illegitimate daughter of Vice Minister Jiang from the Ministry of Rights. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Report chapter comments. Novel bin read light novel, web novel, Korean novel, and Chinese novel online for free. You can find hundreds of English translated light novel, web novel, Korean novel, and Chinese novel which are daily updated. Read novels online. Read light novel online. The Female Psychology PhD Who Time Traveled to the Royal Harem. Chapter 46. The Female Psychology PhD Who Time Traveled to the Royal Harem. Chapter 46. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Currying favor with the masses. Consort Jean glared at Jiang Xinyue. Don't think you're special just because the Xuanwu Emperor rewarded you with some clothes. Relying on beauty to serve others is not a long-term plan. Jiang Xinyue smiled faintly, unfazed by her words. She simply wiped her mouth and said, "One's appearance is given by one's parents, dear sister. What can I do about it? Sister says I serve through beauty, but that's a groundless claim. Do you really think the Xuanwu Emperor is so shallow as to favor consorts solely based on appearance? The phrase serving through beauty could offend every favored consort in the palace if it spread. You." Consort Jean stared at her angrily, clearly not meaning it that way. Jiang Xinyue raised an eyebrow. "Sister, that fried chicken in front of you is golden on both sides. It's best eaten while hot. It won't taste as good when it's cold. Even with food to fill your mouth, you still come looking for trouble with me." For some reason, both Consort Zhang and Consort Jean sensed another layer of meaning in her tone. Ha 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 ha. A deep laugh came from the front, and a dark-skinned, curry-flavored middle-aged man stood up, bowed to the Xuanwu Emperor, and then spewed a torrent of not-so-authentic foreign language. The gist was that he felt the fried chicken was the best dish at this banquet and asked Vice Minister Jiang how it was prepared, hoping to learn the recipe. Shuang Jiang whispered in Jiang Xinyue's ear, "This is Sultan Han, the prince of the Shilabota country." It sounded like a Buddhist country, undoubtedly the future India. The Indians were speaking English this early? Then again, considering that the Great Yen dynasty she found herself in did not exist in history, everything could be viewed from a fictional perspective. In that case, the appearance of an Englishman would not be surprising. How could one trace the historical trajectory of a fictional setting? The vice minister could not answer his question since he did not understand the foreign language, so he yielded the floor to Vice Minister Jiang. Vice Minister Jiang then introduced his daughter. "This is what my daughter did." The Xuanwu Emperor smiled. "Beloved consort, come to your emperor." There was an ominous feeling, as if he wanted to show her off as a palace talisman. With every step she took, she could feel the malicious intent from the consorts around her. But encouraged by the Xuanwu Emperor's approving gaze, she walked with unwavering determination. If the Emperor wanted to establish her authority against the consortcy's faction, why shouldn't she use the Emperor to gain influence and assert her power? Only those who forge ahead with courage and resolve can stand firm in the palace. She stood beside the Emperor, and the two exchanged smiles. The Xuanwu Emperor held her hand, but did not have her sit on his lap, as he still wanted to save face at such an important occasion and avoid appearing like a ruler infatuated with beauty. Wang Dequan, arrange a table and chairs for me beside you, so I can drink and chat merrily with the envoys from various countries. Sultan Han remained standing, awaiting Jiang Xinyue's response. He did not believe the Great Yin Palace had consorts who could speak foreign languages, as there were no women in his palace who spoke the celestial tongue. The foreign language of the Shilabota country was not their native tongue, just as the vassal states under Great Yen had their own languages, but had to learn the imperial language. The four envoy countries, including Shulabotu, as well as Persia, Gaul, and ancient Rome, were supposedly early forms of those nations. Jiang Xinyue called them early forms because in the history of Hua country, there were no records of any dynasty that had all four of these countries sending envoys simultaneously to pay tribute. Under the rule of Western powers, their official language was the foreign tongue. As for India, she could handle that curry-flavored foreign language with her eyes closed. This is fried chicken. Sultan Han's eyes grew wider as he listened, astonished that this woman spoke the foreign tongue so fluently. Moreover, his gaze turned toward the fair-haired, blue-eyed envoy from Gaul, as if to say, "How can she speak the foreign language as well as you?" Then, the envoy from Persia deliberately challenged the Xuanwu Emperor by using obscure and difficult words that even Vice Minister Jiang struggled to translate. The clumsy translation made the Xuanwu Emperor frown, and the envoys from the four countries laughed arrogantly. Jiang Xinyue did not wish to stand out again today, but recalling the future plundering behavior of the Western world, she coldly retorted in the foreign tongue, "We in the Celestial Empire hope that Persia will soon unite the West. We also hope that Persia will then invite envoys from our Celestial Empire to visit the West and behold your vast and fertile lands." It should be noted that among the four envoy countries, Gaul was the dominant power. The other three had just been following Gaul's lead. Jiang Xinyue saw this clearly from her vantage point. Persia had just mocked Great Yan's lack of authority over its vassal states, but now they fell silent in fear. If the king of Gaul truly believed Persia was rebelling and sent troops to suppress them, they would become Persia's eternal villain. The Xuanwu Emperor caressed Jiang Xinyue's hand under the table. "Beloved consort, what did they say earlier?" Jiang Xinyue's expression changed as she smilingly explained. "The envoy from Persia, representing the four envoy countries, wished your majesty eternal prosperity and longevity." "Is that so?" The Xuanwu Emperor raised his cup, "And I wish you all success and a happy new year." After Jiang Xinyue slapped them down, the Xuanwu Emperor offered them a sweet jujube, making it seem as if the imperial couple had rehearsed their act, so seamless was their coordination. The envoy countries did not fare well and left to disparage the Celestial Empire, giving way to the vassal states' turn to pay respects. Goryeo, Fusan, Jin Kingdom, and others presented tributes from their rulers to the Xuanwu Emperor, and officials from the Ministry of Rites reported them, ensuring that gifts of comparable value would be sent to those countries when their envoys returned home. As the banquet drew to a close, Empress Ju showed signs of fatigue, and the Xuanwu Emperor expressed concern. If the Empress is unwell, she may return to the Ikuan Palace first and rest. I will join her later. On New Year's Eve, the Emperor had to stay up to welcome the new year, so he gave Empress Ju due respect. She coughed a few times, her lips pale. "Thank you, Your Majesty, for your concern. I shall take my leave. The Emperor is a man of his word. He said he would come, so he will definitely come. There is no need for you to keep fretting." Concubine Li's handkerchief under the table was practically wrung to shreds, yet she still wore a gentle smile. Now that the Empress has left, Why doesn't precious consort Jiang take the Empress's seat? This would allow me to be closer to the Emperor as well. Tears immediately welled up in Jiang Xinyue's eyes. She fearfully knelt beside the chair. This servant dares not. That is the Empress's seat. I have no such ambition. Concubine Li was ambitious, always instigating others to vie and grab for power, benefiting from their efforts like a fisherman reaping the rewards without lifting a net. New N0vel chapters are published on N0V/E/LBIN co/M. Since she enjoyed inciting others so much, she should just shout out her thoughts and see how she could conceal her intentions. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Report chapter comments. Novel been read light novel, web novel, Korean novel, and Chinese The Female Psychology PhD Who Time Traveled to the Royal Harem. Chapter 47. The Female Psychology PhD Who Time Traveled to the Royal Harem. Chapter 47. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Concubine Li is just joking with you. Don't be afraid. In the past, those words, "don't be afraid," would have soothed all the pain in Concubine Li's heart. But today, the Emperor had said them to another woman instead. She felt a twinge of pain in her heart, but her smile became even more sincere. Your humble servant was indeed joking, but I didn't know Consort Jin was so timid. Back when Concubine Chu pretended to be a ghost to scare you, you were so bold. I thought you were fearless. She deliberately brought that up to let Vice Minister Jiang and Lady Zhou hear it, trying to instigate trouble since her provocation had failed. The Emperor took a deep breath and sighed heavily through his nose. He stopped holding Jiang Xinyue's hand, a sign of his impatience. There were tears flickering in Jiang Xinyue's eyes, but due to the solemn occasion with countless eyes watching her, she forced the tears back and smiled charmingly. It turns out her ladyship Concubine Li cares so much about your humble servant. I'm truly terrified. But you're wrong, your ladyship. I'm not afraid. It's just that with his majesty here, what ghost or demon could get close to him? Empress Ju had ordered the incident at Shihua Palace, where there was rumored to be a ghost, to be covered up. From Concubine Li's words, it seemed she knew every detail of Jiang Xinyue's reaction. Concubine Li was so provoked by the Emperor's favoritism towards Jiang Xinyue that she let something slip without realizing it. The Emperor pondered whether Concubine Li had planted spies around Consort Jin so early on. The once charming, bold, and radiant woman had been dyed too long in the palace's vat, becoming almost unrecognizable to him. Concubine Li wanted to say more, but Xia He, who was by her side, suddenly exclaimed and spilled wine on her dress. Top VL updates on N/O/B/LB/ing.com. She quickly knelt down. Please forgive me, dear ladyship. Your servant was distracted by the music in the hall. It was unintentional. It wouldn't do any good to get angry since Xia, he was one of her own people. Ever since Leu, Xia, he had successfully become the head palace maid of Xinyuan Palace, now acting as Concubine Li's new right-hand woman. She wasn't normally so careless and reckless. Your Majesty, your humble servant's dress is wet. Please allow me to go change. The Xuanwu Emperor nodded and frowned at Xia He. This palace maid of yours has repeatedly shown a lack of discipline, not even as good as the previous one. Xia He's face instantly turned pale. What did the Emperor mean by that? Was he angry because Concubine Li had just tried to embarrass Consort Jin and was venting his anger on Concubine Li's palace maid? Or was he simply displeased that the maid had spilled wine on Concubine Li's dress? His words had a double meaning, allowing different people to interpret them differently based on their own understanding. Only Jiang Xinyue knew that the Xuanwu Emperor was not dissatisfied with Concubine Li, but simply disliked Xia He. Because the last time Concubine Li was injured and unconscious, Xia, he had said in front of all the consorts and concubines that the Emperor treated Jiang Xinyue as Concubine Li's replacement. The looks the other consorts and concubines gave her now had an added hint of fear and apprehension. That wasn't a bad thing. They knew to be afraid, so next time they tried to harm her, They would hesitate and consider whether they could bear the consequences if their plot was exposed. Your Majesty, Jiang Yulin, daughter of Vice Minister Jiang, Wang Rulin, daughter of the Minister of Rights, and Meng Wanru, daughter of the Academician of the Imperial Academy, will perform for your Majesty. Originally, it was Jiang Xinyue's whim to select members from the Office of Music and Dance to form the Great Yan Women's 12 music troupe based on a girl band she loved in her previous modern life. But now, 3 of the performers had been replaced by the daughters of high officials. One of them was even her half-sister from her father's side. What was going on? Were they trying to imitate Consort Rong and noble Consort Rong by having sisters serve the same husband? How twisted. To be honest, although the 3 daughters of officials were the most attractive among the musicians, their musical skills were not as good as the original 3 female musicians from the Office of Music and Dance. The Xuanwu Emperor's sharp eyes revealed a fierce displeasure, his thick eyebrows looking like they were painted with ink, exuding a great sense of intimidation. He was unhappy that his arrangements had been suddenly disrupted. Those further away couldn't see his expression clearly, but Jiang Xinyue, being close to him, could see it plainly. She tugged at the emperor's sleeve and said softly, "Your Majesty is the Son of Heaven, and all officials, civil and military, must follow your commands. For these few daughters of officials to perform and entertain your Majesty, even a reward of gold, silver, or a simple silk flower would be a great honor." Regardless of whether Consort Rong and noble Consort Rong found the idea of 2 sisters serving one man disgusting or not, Jiang Xinyue certainly did. Even if she wasn't the real Jiang Xinyue, even if this body wasn't really hers, the education she had received never taught her to accept such a violation of moral values. Since the emperor didn't like them either, she might as well go along with his wishes and block their path into the palace. Seriously, with all the beauties in the palace that she hadn't dealt with, she couldn't handle having a few more romantic rivals brought in. That would be too much work for her. The music ended, and thunderous applause erupted in the hall. After all, the 3 ladies came from prestigious families, and their skills in music, chess, calligraphy, and painting were exceptional. This performance, though not perfect, was the most brilliant one the officials and concubines had seen in recent years. The annual palace banquets were usually organized by Empress Ju herself, except for the New Year's banquet, which involved the Ministry of Rights due to the presence of foreign envoys. Some people praised the Ministry of Rights for doing a good job this year, but more praised Empress Ju's elegant taste for arranging such a wonderful program. The cuisine was also different from the usual Manchu Han Grand Banquet, very innovative and delicious. Most importantly, it was unique. They had never tasted anything like it elsewhere. Consort De glanced at Consort Jin sitting beside the Emperor and saw that she didn't seem upset about Empress Ju taking credit for her ideas. Only then did she breathe a sigh of relief. The fried chicken with wine, roasted meat with hot pot, and the Palace Women's 12 music troupe that everyone was praising as novel, all of these were Consort Jin's ideas. She didn't ask the Emperor to acknowledge her contribution at such a time, but instead gave all the credit to the Empress, showing great tact. Many of the consorts and concubines in the palace couldn't even compare to her in this regard. Fortunately, concubine Li's dress had been soiled, otherwise she would have come out to expose the truth and undermine the Empress's standing, which she had never wanted to be stable. Considering her own noble status and desire to be the mistress of the palace's 3,000 beauties. Ha ha! The Xuanwu Emperor was greatly delighted by the flattery, feeling that his quoting of Consort Jin's method had received unanimous praise, proving that he still had an eye for talent. Rewards, rewards for all, he declared with a sweeping gesture. The Office of Music and Dance shall be rewarded with 1,000 taels of silver, and as for the daughters of the 3 beloved ministers, material gifts would be demeaning to your status. His hesitation sent the hearts of the 3 racing wildly. I shall reward each of you with a silk flower from the brocade weaving villages of Jiangnan. Ah, that would have been better than material gifts. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Report chapter comments. Novel bin read light novel, web novel, Korean novel, and Chinese novel online for free. You can find hundreds of English translated light novel, web novel, Korean novel, and Chinese novel which are daily updated. Read novels online. Read light novel online. Read online free. Free light novel online. Contact TOS, SciMap, donate. The Female Psychology PhD Who Time Traveled to the Royal Harem. Chapter 48. The Female Psychology PhD Who Time Traveled to the Royal Harem. Chapter 48. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Jiang Yulin nearly fainted. She was to enter the palace and become an imperial noble consort who wanted these broken silk flowers. Wang Rolin and Meng Wanru looked utterly dejected as they received the silk flower sent by Wang Dequan, supported by their maids as they descended. These two women had set their sights on the imperial household, offering their skills voluntarily, but they failed to catch the emperor's eye. After leaving the palace, they could no longer marry into respectable families. Wives with such lofty ambitions were avoided by ordinary officials' families for fear they would cause unrest in the household once they entered. Facing Lady Zhou's stern gaze, Jiang Yulin picked the silk flowers the emperor had bestowed upon her into her hair, smiling sweetly. Your Majesty, this humble servant and my sister have always been very close. May I have a word with her? When she smiled, two adorable dimples formed at the corners of her lips, making even her false smile seem utterly charming. The Xuanwu Emperor had extremely high standards for his consorts. He knew the relationship between Jiang Xinyue and Jiang Yulin better than Jiang Xinyue herself. He turned to ask, Would you like to go over, my love? Jiang Xinyue shook her head. This legitimate younger sister of mine has never understood propriety. I am a person of etiquette. How could I be on good terms with her? She did not take on the persona of a gentle lady, but the emperor was already accustomed to her frank nature and did not find her unkind at all. Instead, he believed that her open display of disdain for Jiang Yulin in front of him was because she trusted him. This reassurance was gratifying to the Xuanwu emperor. He smiled. Vice Minister Jiang's several illegitimate daughters seem to have received decent upbringings. How is it that his legitimate daughter? He tilted his head, expressing dissatisfaction. My love still needs to put in more effort. If only she could be as straightforward and honest as Consort Jin, that would be ideal. There were already enough sweet-faced but wicked women in the palace. There was no need for another like Jiang Yulin. If Wang Rolin and Meng Wanru's earlier exit could be described as a devastating blow, then Jiang Yulin's expression could only be described as utterly dejected. What respectable family would be willing to marry a woman whom the emperor had declared lacked proper upbringing? Even impoverished scholars would prefer to marry daughters from humble backgrounds. Mother. Jiang Yulin looked lost and forlorn. Jiang Xinyue would not console the sister who had bullied her previous incarnation in the Jiang household. As night fell deeper, a few stars hung in the sky, heralding good weather the next day. My love, it's getting late. Shall we retire to your palace? Suddenly, a rapid drumbeat interrupted the Xuanwu Emperor's words. 6 muscular, bare-chested men wearing red headbands carried a large drum, walking unsteadily. Everyone present was drawn to the woman in a red dance costume atop the drum face, revealing a glimpse of her snowy white, soft waist. If Consort Jin embodied a graceful fusion of coyness and purity, elegance and beauty, then the woman atop the drum, veiled in sheer fabric, exuded ultimate allure and seductive charm. Concubinely. Visit Eno Vielbin. C/M for the L-test updates. Jiang Xinyue murmured the name, her lips curling into a faint smile as her hand beneath the table silently unclenched. The Xuanwu Emperor gazed upon concubinely with a hint of nostalgia in his eyes. Jiang Xinyue glanced at Consort Jean, their eyes meeting in midair. Her eyebrows arched slightly. Serving with her body? Wasn't it concubine Li who relied on her physical charms to serve? Consort Jean seemed to understand Jiang Xinyue's gaze, her fair face flushing red as she hurriedly averted her eyes. Damn it! She had hoped to see Consort Jin's embarrassed and flustered expression, but instead, she was the one caught being awkward. After the seductive belly dance ended, the Emperor had reverted from addressing concubine Li as consort to my love. As the banquet drew to a close, the imperial carriage carried the Emperor and concubine Li away together. With the Emperor's departure, the banquet was essentially over. Vice Minister Jiang had to arrange for the foreign envoys and postulates, so he did not leave with his wife and daughters. From a distance, he could only see his illegitimate daughter's dejected and forlorn figures seated in the palanquin. In the past at home, his second daughter was the one who loved to act coy with him the most, clinging to him and treating him as a respected and affectionate father. After entering the palace, their relationship had grown more distant. However, he understood the changes in his eldest daughter. After all, only those who had experienced life in the palace could truly comprehend its hardships. From the Shihua Palace to the Hishi Palace, from the Hishi Palace to the Palace of Exile, and then back to the Hishi Palace again, she must have endured unimaginable suffering, so how could she not have changed profoundly? That ignorant woman, Lady Joe, truly believed the palace was a desirable place, having already lost one legitimate daughter there. Yet she still wanted to send her only remaining legitimate daughter to the palace, just to compete with her elder sister. Sheer foolishness. Consortion. As the palanquin passed by the Chushio Palace, where the palace ladies resided, a pleasant voice called out from behind, Consortion. Yet, this voice sounded strangely anguished. The distance was already quite close. Although Jiang Xinyue wished to avoid getting involved in any conflicts, she could hardly escape now. She could only turn to look and saw Consort Rong leaning back in her palanquin, her forehead beaded with sweat despite the cold weather. Consort Rong. She signaled for her palanquin to stop and hurried over to Consort Rong's palanquin. This servant greets Consort Rong. What seems to be the matter? Consort Rong bit her lip tightly, letting out a low groan from the unbearable pain as a warm liquid flowed out of her body. She clutched Jiang Xinyue's hand in panic. My child. Consort Jin, save my child. Jiang Xinyue held her hand in return. To the Imperial Hospital. It's too far from the Changxin Palace, but the Imperial Hospital is nearby. Let's go there now, quickly. After giving the order, she ran alongside the palanquin, inquiring to Consort Rong's palace maid, "What happened to your mistress?" Mei Xiang wiped away her tears and explained, "Earlier, my mistress was leaving the Bao Hall when one of those lowly serving maids spilled oil at the entrance and didn't clean it up properly. My mistress slipped and fell, but she protected her belly. We thought she was fine, but after walking this short distance, my mistress started bleeding." Whoa. Jiang Xinyue did not believe this story. Wang Dequan was responsible for overseeing all the eunuchs and palace maids during the banquet, and he was always meticulous in his duties. How could he have allowed an oil spill to remain at the entrance of the Baoha Hall? Not to mention that there were pregnant consorts in the palace. Even if it were a foreign envoy who fell due to his negligence, it would not be easily overlooked. Consort Rong clearly did not believe it either, her expression filled with anguish as she struggled to speak. Consort Jen. Escort this one to the Imperial Hospital. This one will owe you a favor. In the palace, the most difficult thing to repay is human sentiment. She showed her sincerity, hoping that Consort Jin was a kind and compassionate person. After all, it was a small life. Jiang Xinyue leaned on the carrying chair, her expression solemn. Shike, Shuang Jian, go ahead and scout the path. Xiao Xuanzi, go to the Changxin Palace and summon the Emperor. This plate was too big for her to handle alone. It would be better to let someone capable share the burden. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Report chapter comments. Novel been read light novel, web novel, Korean novel, and Chinese novel online for free. You can find hundreds of English translated light novel, web novel, Korean novel, and Chinese novel which are daily updated. Read novels online. Red light novel online. Read online free. Free light novel online. Contact TOS, SciMap, donate.